I love animals, and some might look at me and go, well, you eat a lot of them. You must not love them that much.
Saying you love animals and then also eating them is kind of like a cannibal saying they're a people person.
I'm agreeing with you that humans don't have to eat meat. We are the apex predator. We still have that option.
There are victims involved in these choices. So it's not my opinion. It's not your opinion. I'm trying to get to a capital T truth about objective reality and logical consistency.
There's no true death-free meal. Things die.
That was Cam Waters and Raymond Hicks discussing their very different views on the ethics of eating animals.
99% of all animals consumed on the planet are factory farmed.
It's hard to stomach as a meat eater, and I think that's heartbreaking.
Say there's a switch, factory farming's gone.
Right.
Would you flip the switch?
No.
Okay, and why is that?
Flip the switch and everybody's vegan. People would starve.
I'll pause you there. 77% of all cropland is used to feed animals to eat.
My picture perfect world is that regenerative farming.
If humanity converted to pasture raised, it's just not scalable.
Let's both agree that's not sustainable for everybody to do that.
Diet wars can be extremely hostile, but this conversation will pleasantly surprise you.
I believe that God's given us dominion over animals to do with them somewhat as we please.
Parents have dominion over their children, but we don't kill and eat our children.
He called for us to steward these animals, which stewardship, I would say, is caring for them, but that's also eating them.
That dominion mandate in Genesis doesn't include animal slaughter.
What are your thoughts on the flood, God wiping out humanity and the animals?
Will they find common ground, or will they leave more convinced than ever of their own beliefs?
You know, humans were probably vegan.
Well, it's not a probably. It's not a probably. It's just scripturally a fact.
You know far more about the Bible than I do. I'm not a scholar.
I love the Bible, yeah.
We should be striving towards the ideal is living like Eden is the ideal.
Yeah, which in essence would make me a hypocrite.
You don't give a rip.
Clearly it works, right? You guys are two pieces of evidence for that. Maybe anecdotal evidence, but personally, I love anecdotal evidence. You got to, as a carnivore. With that in mind, would you say that eating meat is sin?
Sin literally just means to miss the mark. Well, what's the mark? To say we're carnivores is a whole logical leap from the way that we're designed.
For the record, I don't think humans are carnivores.
If you're saying we're not carnivores, but you're influencing people all around the world to become carnivores,
I think there's a little bit of a moral superiority.
Absolutely not. I have zero moral superiority. I don't think I'm better because I do that at all.
You think I'm worse because I do?
I think that you're deceived from truth, from reality. You're in the matrix.
They live very good lives. And then even up into the point of, okay, it's time to be slaughtered. They use that drill. It's not a drill bit. It's a bolt gun. It knocks them out. They feel nothing. I would love to die that way.
If we had a bolt gun behind the couch right now, and I pulled it up and put it to your head, you wouldn't flinch and try to get away.
Of course I would.
Okay, well, animals do too.
I think humans are above them.
What trait makes us above them?
We're made in the image of God.
Would you consider the life of a bug to be at the same value as the life of a cow? And if not, is that not a moral hypocrisy a little bit?
Great question, and a very fair question. So,
hey guys, thanks so much for being here. Would you do me a favor and hit that subscribe button? Only about 10% of you who watch the show are subscribed to the channel. And the more people who subscribe, the bigger and better guests and bolder conversations I can continue to bring on. So I would really appreciate it, and I just appreciate your support. All right, bye. All right, welcome to the podcast. Thank you, Ray and Cam, for coming on. This is the second time for you to come on the podcast, Cam. And I'm imagining this is going to be a completely different conversation. We're setting up the conversation differently. The last time I had you on was about whether Jesus was a vegan. Very, very interesting. One of my favorite debates that I hosted. That was so much fun. Today is going to be about the ethics of eating animals. And Ray, I would love for you to go first and share how long you've been eating carnivore and what led you to eating that way.
Yeah, so I started the carnivore diet August 1st of 2023, so coming up on 2 years, and heard about it maybe a month prior and thought to myself, that's flipping nuts. These people are weird. Clearly that's not healthy. Where do you get your vitamins and like nutrients from? Not knowing much about it. And anyways, I saw this podcast of Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson talking about it, and love him or hate him, I find Joe Rogan entertaining, and I do respect Jordan Peterson. I don't think he's a man that talks about things flippantly. I think he's intentional with words. And so you got Joe who's saying, you know, I lost weight really quickly and I had joint pain go away. And I'm thinking, I mean, I've got the weight to lose. I can afford to lose weight. I'm 295 pounds. And then you got Jordan Peterson talking about him and his daughter, who have had a slew of autoimmune issues, and their mental health was not good. And that's something I've always struggled with. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'll give it a shot. Didn't think I'd stick to it. Figured I'd cheat with pizza and ice cream. It's always been my vice. And 3 days in, I crawl out of bed and my knee doesn't hurt. And I've had knee pain for over a decade from a surgery. I had 60% of my meniscus removed and just always had knee pain. And it's gone. I'm thinking, this is wild. Like, is this placebo? Like, that can't be real. And so I do a couple squats and sure enough, no pain. I'm looking in the mirror. I'm thinking, like, I feel skinny. I'm not skinny. I feel skinny. And just no bloating, no inflammation. And mentally, as someone who's taken antidepressants and successfully, and they've worked for me and have come off them just to go back to a depressed state, it just kind of felt like life was possible. Like life wasn't all doom and gloom. Like, hey, maybe this is worth living. And so fast forward 30 days, I'm down 35 pounds, which carnivore is not the only way to lose weight. I've been fat before, got fit, eating whole foods, got fat again, lost it again, doing carnivore. That's a lot of weight to lose in a pretty short period amount of time. And so fast forward, let's say 6 months, I'm down 90 pounds, which again, it's a considerable amount of weight. I feel phenomenal. Like, I feel good. I feel sharp. I feel like, I always say, I feel like I could make prime Mike Tyson flinch. Like, if it's me or him, like, I'm going to come out on top. I wouldn't, but that's how I feel. And yeah, and just after that 30-day mark, I just made a video, just sharing my experience, not thinking anything of it. Didn't think anybody would care to hear. And it just got a lot of views, and I just kept trying to answer people's questions. And so fast forward 2 years, and Ellen, I'm on your show.
Yeah, thank you for being here so much on this topic of the ethics of eating animals. Thanks for sharing that. Cam, how long have you been vegan, and what led you to eating that way?
So it's actually been about 15 years now. When I made the full transition was in 2010. But leading up to that, it was actually a spiritual journey for me that led me there. Since I was a kid, I was raised Southern Baptist in the Bible Belt. My whole family ministers and in gospel music and everything like that. And also alongside that was a hunter, fisherman. I fished in Florida in the Gulf of Mexico, well, Gulf of America now, I guess, since Trump's been in office. Fishing in the Gulf of America for grouper, snapper, the whole deal, hours offshore. And then I also had a stepdad who owned a barbecue restaurant, which I would support and smoke barbecue butts and everything. So like the least likely candidate to consider this type of thing. But a part of my faith was eventually when I was 17 years old, it exploded in the Protestant movement, the Daniel fast, which the quick, short, and sweet is it's a biblical prophet who is enslaved by King Nebuchadnezzar. And when he's enslaved, the way that he kind of ejects himself from the matrix, if you will, to use an analogy, is he refuses to eat the flesh from the king's table and the wine too. And he tests stronger and wiser and healthier than all the king's men. Well, when I learned that at 17, it was a huge surprise to me because I was raised, a lot of my Bible stories as a kid was VeggieTales, this popular, you probably know it. And the VeggieTales Daniel story was my first VHS. And I remember watching it as a kid, and it told me how this Daniel was this epic guy. He survived the lion's den. He didn't get burned in the furnace and all this, but it never mentioned that he refused flesh and he only ate vegetables. So I'm like, why did nobody tell me this part? Because I'm going into the Daniel fast ready to, read my Bible or whatever, but I wasn't super prepared to like change my diet like that. So it was actually pretty hard. But once I got into it, I started to experience mental, physical, and I would dare to say even spiritual changes, and started to really get curious about what I consumed for the first time as a 17-year-old who didn't think about that sort of thing. So around the same time, the ethical principle came in because my mother was a insurance sales lady and she got asked to audit a chicken farm. That's where some employees needed insurance. And when she was there, she saw what was going on for the first time. She had never seen, because most of that's behind closed doors. You don't really know what's going on. You just get the packaged product, right? So she came home from whatever she saw and started throwing chicken in the trash can. And then that turned from chicken to red meat to fish to whatever. And my stepdad's freaking out, like, what is going on here? I was too. But over time, I started to really consider some of those questions. And it was, I know our debate conversation, whatever you want to call it today, is more of a philosophical, ethical thing. So maybe some of the spiritual stuff will come up. I'll try to table that as much as I can and just keep it about moral consistency, philosophy, that sort of thing. But even for me, the ethical principle was a thing that I learned over time, because it's just so hard to really learn what's going on behind closed doors. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so I would say that over this course of the last 15 years that because basically when I did the Daniel fast, I just never really stopped. So over this course of the last 15 years, I've studied scripture, I've looked at philosophy, I've looked at what's going on behind the scenes with farming and everything. And it's only further and further solidified my position to, cause the least harm and thrive on plants.
Okay. For both of you, what is suffering and sentience, and does it matter when it comes to animals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Suffering, if we're talking physical suffering, I would say being in pain for an extended period of time. That's probably how I would define it. And then sentience, that's tough to say. I think that the average person defines a sentient being as something cute, like babies, for example, like as a cluster of cells. Are they sentient? A live being, typically one that can make its own choices, would be a sentient being. I think that its basic definition, that's how I define it.
And does it matter when it comes to the conversation about eating animals in your eyes?
I think it does, yes. Yeah.
Okay. You want to reply, and then you guys can go back and forth a little bit on this?
Yeah. My understanding of sentience, to answer that question first, is the capacity for individuality, the capacity to suffer, having a central nervous system, neofrontal cortex, all the things that enable an individual to have a conscious experience. And as far as I know, the animal kingdom up to us all has that. I know we're going to probably talk about bugs and some of these other things, which will be fun. But yeah, that would be my answer to that. Was there another question?
And does it, I imagine your answer is going to be yes. Does it matter when it comes to animals?
Absolutely. I believe in the ethical principle that just so happens to be a spiritual principle through Jesus, to the process of doing unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And I consider animals to be others.
What are your thoughts on that?
I used to think the blue blocker industry was kind of a gimmick, because I ordered blue blocker glasses on Amazon and felt no difference in my life whatsoever. When I put on my first Raw Optics pair of glasses, I felt an immediate nervous system difference in my experience on the screens. I used to get really tired eyes from working on my screens a lot, editing my videos, and sometimes I had to work at night from work deadlines with my YouTube videos, and my eyes would get so tired, and then my nervous system just felt so off, because we need sunlight during the day and we need it to be really dark at night. So if our eyes are just staring at this bright screen late at night, it makes complete sense why we wouldn't be able to fall asleep easily at night. Then I started using their sunset glasses, and I felt an immediate difference. I could fall right to sleep afterwards at night because it literally blocks all the blue. There's absolutely no blue coming in, and my eyes are no longer tired when I'm working on a screen. Even for your children, if they're in fluorescent lighting, if they're on screens, I am a Raw Optics fan for life now, because I have seen such an incredible difference for my nervous system, for my eyes no longer being tired, protecting my vision into my future. Raw Optics is the only brand that takes into consideration the circadian rhythm that we need for our optimal health, and they are an investment because they're such high quality, great glasses. Skip the Amazon blue blocker glasses. You're not going to see a difference. It's not worth it at all. When I'm watching a movie at night with my husband, it is the perfect way for me to settle my circadian rhythm, support my health and well-being, and wear these, and I fall right to sleep. Click the link below in the show notes and get 10% off your order, or enter the code Ellen Fisher at checkout. One of the best ways that you can support this show is buying the products from our sponsors and using my code.
This episode is brought to you by Anima Mundi Herbals, my go-to woman-founded apothecary for truly conscious plant medicine. Every blend is made in the U.S. with certified organic, wild-crafted, and sustainably harvested botanicals. Always vegan, gluten-free, and filler-free. One of my current favorites, their Happiness Tonic Powder. It's a warm, earthy super powder crafted to help balance your mood and support emotional well-being. It blends time-honored adaptogens like ashwagandha and rhodiola with uplifting herbs like albizia and St. John's wort. What makes it so special is the taste. Roasted dandelion, chicory, maca, mesquite, vanilla, and more, creating a cozy, coffee-inspired flavor that's malty, gently bitter, and deeply grounding. I love stirring it into warm milk for an afternoon ritual that feels comforting and genuinely uplifting. Discover their apothecary of over 200 herbal treasures in Brooklyn, Venice, or online. Click the link in my bio and use the code ELLEN for 15% off. Nourish your mood naturally with Anima Mundi Herbals.
I think it takes a big heart to include animals in that do unto others as you would have, done unto yourself. I really admire those that say, I really care about animals. I'm not going to eat animals from here on out, because I love animals. And some might look at me and go, well, you eat a lot of them. You must not love them that much. And I'd say, well, you're probably right. Like, I think you are right. I think the fact that, Cam, you have, and Ellen, you as well, you guys have such big hearts that you refrain from eating animals completely. And my understanding, I know you for sure, I assume you as well, you guys probably do it in a pretty regenerative way. Of all the ways that you could be vegan, I assume that you guys are at the tippy top of this is the best way to do it. And that takes a lot. It's a lot of denying yourself. I'm not there. I think that humans are more important than animals. I think that as a Bible-believing Christian, I do believe that God gave us dominion over the earth. I think that animals are within that. I think that it's absolutely horrendous what happens, like the farm that your mother had went to. I think that happens far more than regenerative, the good farming. And I think that's heartbreaking. I think it's a bit of a catch-22 because, if I had it my way and I said, hey, starting this very second, factory farms exist no more, the world wouldn't sustain. It would cause a lot of issues. It's the same thing with monocrop agriculture. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's terrible for the environment. I also don't think it would be sustainable to stop it overnight. And I think that's why discussions like this are important to how do we move forward and become better.
I really appreciate you being honest with that share, and also saying how you're just not there. And hopefully, I want to preface by all the things I'm about to respond to that in this discussion, I know you're a straight shooter, so we can maybe just probe and ask some of these questions and not just get to like our own personal opinion on something, but some type of capital T truth. And so firstly, I would say I'm glad you mentioned the whole, because I heard you say on a podcast or something that you love animals. And I kind of feel like, which it kind of sounds like what you said, that maybe you don't, or you see there's a line there, because saying you love animals and then also eating them is kind of like a cannibal saying they're a people person in a way. If
I understand what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think there's a little bit of a moral inconsistency there to be able to love an animal, but also eat their bodies and that sort of thing. But you brought so many points in that one thing that I want to cover. So you said that you mentioned factory farming. Okay, so what is it particularly about factory farming that you don't like?
From the moment they're born to the moment they're slaughtered. It's a pretty horrendous, god-awful life. I mean, I've seen the documentaries, and it's hard to stomach. As a meat eater, it is extremely hard to stomach, and I think it's terrible. How they're treated, how they live in a cage most of their life. Debatably, even, how some of them are slaughtered. When I look at that, I go, that's not right. That's not how it's supposed to be.
Do you have a idea of how it's supposed to be if it's not that? Yeah.
So the meat that I vastly consume is from a farm called Diamond H Ranch. It's a husband and wife, Michael and Nikki. They're wonderful. They have a strong emphasis on regenerative farming. They're a regenerative farm. And so that just means grass-fed and finished cows. the cows graze on grass, and when the grass gets low, they move them to fresher pastures, and their manure it helps with the soil, and they live very good lives. And then even up into the point of, okay, it's time to be slaughtered, they use what's called a it's not a nail gun, it's I'm blanking on it. It's not a gun. It makes the cow unconscious. The cow doesn't even know it. They put it into a chute, which you might think, well, that's probably terrifying the animal. They're raised being placed in chutes, and so it's a pretty normal thing, when they're being tended to for any kind of medical procedure, or trimming of the hooves or whatever it be. And so it's not this. It's life's really good, and then one day they're unconscious, and then they're just no more. And to me, I look at that and I go, okay, of all the ways that an animal could die, I'm okay with that.
Cool. So first too, what I remembered you said earlier was you mentioned our big hearts to not eat animals. And I do want to be clear that I like to think I have a big heart, but at the same time, I don't think that that's actually a requirement to really understand the philosophy. And in fact, in some ways, I probably could have a bigger heart. But for me, it's actually more of a logical, philosophical position than it even is. It's more about justice and about right and wrong and those kinds of things, rather than just being. So I don't want to just like, it feels a little bit like a straw man to just be like, oh, because you have a big heart, that's why you love animals and you want to protect them. So on the factory farming piece versus free range, pasture raised, yada, 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 this kind of thing, I would kind of push on that because from a number of levels. Number one, 99% of all animals consumed on the planet are factory farmed, literally 99%. So it's very rare that anyone on planet Earth is eating pasture raised, grass fed, whatever. And if humanity converted to pasture raised, you kind of said this in the response earlier, that it's just not scalable. Like people have to eat factory farming because of the level of consumption of animals that is happening on the planet. There's no other way to do it because there's not enough grassland. Even the top free range pasture raised farmers like Joel Salatin and what's the one in Georgia by where I grew up, White Oak Pastures. Those guys will all tell you, yeah, this isn't actually a scalable model. And it needs to be pretty expensive to be able to do it properly, et cetera. So it's not really a solution for most people.
I actually had the White Oak Pastures founder on my podcast for like an environmental discussion about eating animals.
Right. And I think he might have said something like that on the podcast. I can't remember, but just the idea of, is it scalable for humanity to eat?
Yeah, that was a big part of the discussion between them and an ecologist who was a plant-based ecologist.
Right. So my question, there's so many things I want to say. I want to get into dominion and all that stuff too, but just to stay on this thread, my question would be, if you disagree with factory farming, would you do whatever you could to end it? Like if say there's a switch, factory farming is gone, would you flip the switch?
No.
Okay. And why is that?
Just because the impact that it would have on humans. I mean, shoot, even if, again, flip the switch and everybody's vegan, people would starve. The current infrastructure for fruits and vegetables, it's not enough to sustain human life right now as is. Could it get to that? Who knows? Maybe.
Well, I'll pause you there. Quite literally, if you flip the switch tomorrow, it would be a logistical nightmare. But there's actually enough calories to feed humanity. We feed so much plant foods to animals to fatten them up for slaughter that and we only get 12% of that caloric intake back to us. It's like a super inefficient system. So I believe it's like 77% of all cropland is used to feed animals to eat.
Yeah.
So if we redirected those calories towards, say, world hunger, we could end it in a flip of a switch.
Yeah. I still wouldn't flip it. I really wouldn't. As sad as I think factory farming is, I think that the current world and environment that we live in, my picture perfect world is that regenerative farming, that does happen. Let's both agree that's not sustainable for everybody to do that. I would say perfect world is that everybody that chooses to eat meat, that's how they do it. They do it the ethical way, my definition of an ethical meat eater.
So then to be clear, given that 99% of all animals have to be factory farmed to support the level of consumption that we have on the planet, are you suggesting then that maybe 1% or less of humanity should eat meat?
It's an individual choice. I don't know that enough people care to have that flip switched to where my opinion's irrelevant. But no, I don't think less than 1% of people should eat meat. I think there's more meat eaters in the world than, that less than 1%.
It sounds like because you put in your mind, tell me if I'm saying it correctly, because humans are more important than animals, then that means no matter the level of suffering that you're describing that you seem to not like or disagree with as optimal, it still doesn't matter because humans have free will and should have the choice to eat animals because they are more important than animals. Is that getting that accurate?
That's well said. Yeah, that would place humans above animals.
Okay. What do you think about that?
I think it's pretty clear that humans are unique, that we have definitely certain advantages, our capacity for reason, abstraction, the levels of mirror neurons, communication, the ability to use words, which is abstraction. But the question isn't, I don't think, how different we are, but what difference between us and other animals justifies using them as commodities in any way, really. So is there a particular trait that animals have or don't have compared to humans that justifies the way that we use them?
Yeah. I look at it as a hierarchy, and humans are, above any other species, the most apex predator. And if you remove humans from it, the killing of animals, that happens regardless. And so when I look at humans being at the very top of the food chain, whether with or without our hands, with guns or whatever that's gotten us to this point, us being the apex predator, we have the ability to choose to eat those animals and do it in unethical ways, unfortunately.
Well, I would push on that and say that's kind of a might makes right fallacy, in that just because you have the power to do something doesn't mean that you should, right? Like, I have the power or you have the power to go subjugate a child or rape someone or do whatever, but we don't do that, right? We know that that's wrong. So just because you have the power to something to do it as an apex predator in a hierarchy doesn't mean that you should. Agreed?
100%. Yes.
And then the second point was kind of, I think, curtailed into that is a little bit of a appeal to nature fallacy. So because it's in the natural world, there are predators and prey, et cetera, that are you implying that kind of justifies what we're doing?
I'm just implying that that's life. It's truly the cycle of life and death. That's what makes our world go round.
So there's a lot that goes on in nature, obviously, that we don't replicate, right? As humans, I mean, we have iPads and we're sitting in a house with lights on us and video cameras and everything. Predators in the wild, not only do they eat other animals, but they also sniff each other's butts. We didn't sniff each other's butts when we came in, sort of thing. So I don't think that appealing to nature is necessarily a logical way to look at it. But I mean, if there's something I'm missing, feel free to share. But I just think that appealing to natural order and hierarchy, I don't think really actually holds up under ethical scrutiny.
I understand what you're saying. I think that's a fundamental disagreement that we have. I get the, just because we can do something doesn't mean that we should do something. I would say that for the vast majority of humans, they're okay with meat consumption, right? Eating animals, even killing animals.
Well, okay. What is killing? Sorry, we're going to get into some of these questions, I think, right?
This is good.
Can we just flow? Okay. What would you, I think it is good to really understand terms a little bit. So what is killing to you?
Taking a life, not breathing, existing no more. No more being sentient. You're
Cool.
dead.
And by the way, I'm not trying to even do a gotcha. I really want to just understand the way, because sometimes we see things differently. I mean, sometimes we say like, hush up or I'm going to kill you, and we don't really mean it, right? Do you see a difference in like forms of killing? If there's like an accidental death versus an intentional death, premeditated, self-defense?
Sure. Like kill and murder, I would say, have two different definitions.
And what would be the definition of murder?
Murder would be intentionally going out of your way to end something's life. On purpose, yes. Without reason.
Okay. And you said something, or someone.
Animals would be included in that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then how is killing an animal for food not murder?
There's purpose behind that. If I were to kill somebody just because, there's no purpose in that. That's sick and twisted. Killing an animal and honoring that animal, let's say you eat from nose to tail and you truly steward every piece of that animal's life well. From the moment that it's born, you're raising it, you're caring for it, or shoot, maybe you're just a hunter. And then using every bit of it. I'm talking the bones for bone marrow or whatever, bone broth, the organs, every bit of the animal. And if you want to get crazy with it, you can, use that as clothing. Stewarding the animal, there's purpose behind taking that animal's life. I wouldn't define killing an animal with that intent as murder. I would define it as killing an animal, but not murder.
Okay. But if it's not necessary to kill animals for food, does that change? I know there's reasons why you may think it is, but hypothetically for a second, let's say we came to some agreement here or whatever, that it wasn't necessary to kill animals for food, then would that be murder?
No. In fact, I do agree with you that it's not necessary. I think that humans can, obviously, you guys are both stunning individuals. You guys are very healthy. It's not like you're going to die tomorrow.
Thank you.
That's very nice of you to say. Most of the times we get the people, well, I don't consider you in that category, of course, but there's like anti-vegans that just would love to pick apart how just malnourished, you're going to die tomorrow. You look sick.
Don't read comments.
No, I don't.
It's not healthy.
Not anymore, I don't. It's just not worth it.
No, but you two are prime examples. You said 15 years vegan.
Almost 19 years.
Almost 19 years. So you guys have done it for a significant amount of time, much longer than I've done carnivore. Clearly, it works, right? You guys are two pieces of evidence for that. Maybe anecdotal evidence, but personally, I love anecdotal evidence. You got to, as a carnivore. With that in mind, I'm agreeing with you that, hey, humans don't have to eat meat. Which is what I would resort back to. We are the apex predator. We still have that option, and I don't see it as morally wrong. I wouldn't group that in with groping a child.
Okay, so I would love for you to make the argument to him why it's not morally wrong. Why should he? Not expecting you to change his mind or thinking that you're going to change his mind, but why in your mind is it not morally wrong, specifically, other than the fact that we are apex predators and that we're different to animals? If you have anything more than that, I think that would be really interesting. And I would love for you to make the argument for him why he should care enough to not eat animals. Because sounds like I think most people listening would say they love animals, or a lot of people would. They love animals, but they also eat animals. And so I'm imagining that's the majority of people on the planet, right? Or at least people listening. So why should they care enough? Like you can both agree humans and animals are different. That's kind of where I'm at between that. Why don't you go first?
Just say the first part of the
question. Yeah, sorry. I had so many, as I'm listening, there's so many questions.
I know there's so much I want to respond to.
I love it.
Packed into one of your responses, but I haven't yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So why is it that animals and humans, aside from being apex predators, is there any other reason why they should not be morally considered to not eat them, even if we can? So I imagine you're against you would be pro laws that are hurting animals without justifiable reason, right? Like abusing animals. Most people are against that. Abusing animals in a way where it's for the kick of it, right? A lot of vegans would argue that killing them is abusing them. But let's just say the way that a lot of laws are that you can't kick a dog. But again, that gets into something else because there's only certain animals that it applies to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's where I'm going with that. Is there any other reason that makes it so that it's okay to eat them morally fine, besides the fact that you're an apex predator?
Yeah. I guess resorting back to just how I was raised, considering what I've always believed in reading the Bible, I believe that God's given us dominion over animals to do with them somewhat as we please. Now, don't let your mind go to the worst place. I'm not talking about abusing animals, but he called for us to steward these animals, which stewardship, I would say, is caring for them, but that's also eating them. And so when I think of eating meat, there's not an ounce of me that goes, morally, this is wrong. How it's processed and how we've gotten to this state in the world today, especially the United States and certainly some other countries, I think it's horrific. I don't think Christ would condone it. I think he would condemn it. And I also don't know what his answer would be. And so, I know you have some thoughts, and I'm curious to hear them.
Yeah,
I want to learn.
Sure. Well, to go out of the philosophical moral consistency back to the scripture for a second, because it sounds like that matters a lot to you, and it does to me too. That's really how I entered this whole journey to start with. So when you talk about dominion, what's really interesting about dominion, and what shocked me too on my journey, was dominion's laid out in Genesis, the first chapter, right? In the Garden of Eden. And chapter 1:26 through 1:28, or I'm sorry, chapter 1, verse 26 through 28 are really the bulk of, I give you dominion over the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, the fish of the sea, that which creeps on the ground. Mm-hmm. But what we miss, and what I missed, and maybe it sounds like you missed, is the following verse in 129, we're prescribed a plant-based diet to eat the fruit of the trees and the herbs of the field. And then it goes on in verse 30, where it talks about animal slaughter amongst predator and prey even. So that dominion mandate that's laid out in Genesis that you're referring to doesn't include animal slaughter. And in fact, it's more of, I love that you're using the word stewardship, because that's really the idea that I think the consensus among Christianity, from Catholicism down to even Protestantism now, is that dominion is stewardship. But I would even take it a step further in that, we've talked a lot about hierarchy in this conversation. Jesus, who exemplifies God in the fullest form in terms of Christianity, he is unique in that he flips the hierarchy all the time. The last shall be first and the first shall be last, right? And what is a leader? A servant, right? Servant leadership. So in a way, when I see dominion and I see that God gives us dominion over the animals, it's a servanthood position. It's not to dominate them. And in fact, there's kind of a mistranslation even around the original scripture. So the word being translated to rule over in that context of the scripture is the word yarad, or yaridu, I'm sorry. And there's a root to that word that actually means to lower oneself to in service. Now there's radah, which many people think are the root. I'm getting into linguistics a little bit, but this is how you come to this understanding that it's not the way a king dominates. If you take the radah root, you can get this, the way a king dominates over another territory or whatever. But it's also kind of the same context as like parents have dominion over their children, right? But we don't kill and eat our children. God has dominion over us, but God's not killing and eating us, So there's not really room, I don't think, scripturally with the dominion mandate to justify slaughter.
What are your thoughts on the flood, God wiping out almost all of humanity and animals?
So the way the text reads is, it's in a way, not even in a way, the reality is the earth had become so violent and corrupt that that consequence was brought on itself. So the way I believe it, and again, it's not just me, I was just talking to a Catholic recently that believes this, that God set up a natural law of the universe, right? And that's where we get a lot of our subsequent laws, like the Ten Commandments and everything from. And when you break those laws with impunity, the actual natural consequences come. I mean, I'm sure you believe that, right? Like, I don't want to.
You're saying that that's justified, though.
Well, it's not just it essentially the verb that's used. Again, I have to get into linguistics because I studied the scripture in the Bible. That's one thing I didn't really share in the beginning is in the 15-year journey that I've been on, I didn't mean for this to happen, but I basically became a Bible scholar at this point. Sometimes I'm like, I should just go to school and do it because I'm studying Greek and I'm studying Hebrew and I'm getting into the scripture. But in the text before the flood, it says that the earth had become full of violence and corruption. Violence, we know what that is. That corruption word, though, underneath it is the Hebrew shakath, is the Hebrew word there. Well, interestingly, the root of that word is a shared root with shoket and shakita, which is the priest who kills animals and the process of slitting an animal's throat. So shakath, shoket, shakita are all interrelated. So it's really kind of like saying the earth had become full of violence and animal slaughter. Mm-hmm. And this goes deep into this idea that supplements Genesis, which is the Enochian tradition, which was a really famous tradition in text at the time of Jesus. The schools of Judaism had become really obsessed with this book of Enoch. And it gives more context to that flood story. And it says that fallen angels, literally demons, taught man. In chapter 7, verse 14, it says that these fallen angels began to devour the flesh of animals one after the other and drink their blood. And this is what led to the earth being full with all this violence and corruption. And then when God allows for the earth to be flooded, the verb form that's used there is called a hiphil verb form, which doesn't mean necessarily that God caused it. It also can mean God allowed it because of free will, right? We learn from our consequences. That's the beauty of free will, is I make a choice and then I learn from the consequences. So similar to how, you cut down the forest to grow a pasture to raise grass-fed beef in the Amazon, and the temperature is going to rise 15, 20%. I'm not someone who's going to sit here and talk about global warming because I think there's way more factors than that. But regional warming, it's a plain fact. There's a couple down in the Amazon who have grown a forest where it used to be a cow pasture, and it's like 15 to 20 degrees cooler there now, and streams are coming out of the ground when it used to be arid and they were like having water problems.
Give you a chance to reply. That was a lot.
So you do agree the flood happened? Do you think that humans went away? You think the animals perished in that?
Well, I don't want to get too lost in scripture, but I think regional or global flood, there's, the Younger Dryas event and everything there. Scientifically, you can even prove that there was a cataclysm of flooding around the world. Yeah.
But your response to that is simply just, we live in a fallen world. That was the result of just the world being filthy at that time. It's not that God took pleasure in that.
Well, when I read the story, though, that's the funny thing is I don't actually focus on the flood. I focus on the fact that Noah rescued all the animals. So
that's good, but will you answer that?
Well, I don't know the question.
It was justified. It happened because it was just a fallen world. The animals did die. Humans did die.
Well, I don't even know if I could label it justified or unjustified. It's just a natural consequence of what was happening with the natural law of the universe.
I think he was asking too, though, about did God take pleasure in that? And that was one of your questions, right?
Not necessarily. I know you don't think God took pleasure.
No, not at all.
You're a rational person.
Yeah.
But
I think God wants no bloodshed or death at all. It's very clear in the Edenic ideal and in the kingdom of heaven, the future that we're all striving to, that Jesus exemplified. There's no slaughter or death. Yeah. Unnecessarily, right?
Sure. It's interesting. I actually do think that in the beginning, talking about the Garden of Eden, whether it was a real place or not, I think your thought process on, humans were probably vegan.
Well, it's not a probably. It's not a probably. It's just scripturally a fact. In do you know Genesis 1:29?
I was going to say I agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you said probably. I just wanted to be clear.
Okay. Well, okay. Let's say indefinite fact. Humans were vegan.
According to the scripture is what I was saying.
Sure. Let's say that's true. I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying that's probably correct. Let's say it is correct. And then fallen world. Man sins, people start eating meat. And I've heard others ask you this question, but I don't know that I've gotten an answer from the material that I've watched from you that I think, that suffices. why wouldn't God come out and say just verbatim that, hey, it is wrong to eat animal flesh?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered, could birth actually be quicker, easier, and even pleasurable? I'm here to tell you, yes, it absolutely can. If you didn't know, I'm a mother of 5 children and gave birth to all of my children in the comfort and safety of my home. And together with my sister, plus an incredible team of experts, including an OBGYN, doula, brain rewiring coach, and prenatal yoga teacher, we created the Empowered Pregnancy and Birth course. I poured my heart and soul into this course. It is my absolute passion to help expecting women have an easier labor and quicker birth, and most importantly, a birth that you love. In this course, we show you how to choose the right birth team and setting for you to give birth where you feel safest. You'll discover tools most people never hear about, from rewiring your subconscious beliefs about birth to practical tips that speed up labor and learning the secrets to avoid tearing. Birth isn't something that just happens to you. We are not passive passengers just along for the ride. You are in control in more ways than you realize. Birth is a skill, and you can direct the outcome in many ways, including how birth feels. If you're pregnant or planning to become pregnant soon, come join our course and gain the tools and confidence to help create the birth you envision. Visit theempoweredbirth.com to learn more and hear what our course students have to say. And just for my listeners on this podcast, you can enter the code EllenPodcast at checkout to get $50 off the course. It would be an honor to be part of your birth experience. You were made for this.
Well, I think it's pretty clearly implied, and the reason why is because human hands wrote the Bible. I mean, that's just a fact, right? So they're channeling the truth of God the best they can. And I think when you look at the Edenic ideal, it's very clear that slaughter is not a part of the picture. Animals are not to be killed or used for any purpose. They're actually meant to be supported in stewardship and in guiding them towards flourishing, just like we would our own children, right? And the same is in the kingdom of heaven vision that is laid out in Isaiah 11. You know, it goes even to the extent of saying that predator and prey relationships cease in the kingdom of heaven, that the wolf will lay with the lamb and the lion will eat straw like the ox, and they shall not hurt or destroy. And there's that destroy word again, like the flood. It's cool because it comes back in the kingdom of heaven vision, shakath, they shall not slaughter innocent beings in this kingdom of heaven vision. And Jesus comes and says that that's fulfilled. So, I
don't know that it is obviously laid out. I mean, let's agree that in the beginning it was vegan, and not in this fallen world, but in the next new world, it'll be back to vegan. And in the interim, there's this flesh eating. I don't know that it is clear that God's condemned the eating of flesh. I mean, take the Daniel fast, for example. What took you to this, where you are today. How would you define fast? What is fasting?
Yeah, I think most would define fasting as a period of time. But what's interesting that
what do you fast from, though?
Well, you can fast. I mean, there are people that take the definition of fasting really far, where they fast from TV and all this kind of stuff.
Spiritually, when you think fasting, how would you define that?
Well, now my fasts are because I eat in the dietary sense, because I sometimes living in the city will, be partaken of less than ideal foods that I wouldn't. I get back to whole foods, or even sometimes I'll do full on juice fast, or really completely fasting, like no food. I think that's the ultimate. I think everybody needs to do that a little bit. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. What I'm getting to is we don't fast from things that are morally wrong. Like I don't fast from sexual immorality. I abstain from it. I fast from food, and it draws me closer to God because I enter into a suffering. And I'm closer to Jesus, and that's how I interpret it. I don't think anybody says that I'm fasting murder or fasting killing or kidnapping or fill in the blank with any horrendous act. Let's say if Animals is on that same page of these horrendous things, we wouldn't fast from these things. Daniel wouldn't have fasted from it. He would have just abstained from it all his life.
Well, what's interesting is Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian, who is the primary source cited when apologists proved the historical existence of Jesus. He's a juggernaut of history at the time, and he knew the Jewish faith really well and a lot of the additional commentary and the conversation around these texts. And he says on Daniel that Daniel didn't fast. He perpetually abstained from eating any living creature. That's the way that he spoke of it. So again,
indefinitely, or in that time period?
Indefinitely. So the time period that's outlaid in the scripture indicates the period of time of the test. So the way things were going in the exiles and the being captured to Babylon, the Hebrews are slaves, right? And not all of them are laborers as slaves. The ones that are really smart, they made them intellectual slaves because they could get the knowledge that they were producing. So they said, hey, you were studying back in your land, but now that you're here in my land, keep studying, and here, eat all this food and, do your best. But he abstained from the food. And because of that, the eunuchs that were overseeing him, that were kind of like the magi to the king and everything, the middle point from the king, they were threatened by the fact that he was saying he was going to abstain from food. They were worried that it would come back on them if something went wrong, like if you guys get sick or whatever. And so Daniel said, well, just test me for 10 days, because they weren't going to let him do it. But he said, no, just give me 10 days. And after 10 days, they did a test. So that it's not like it was a 10-day fast. It was a 10-day test. And then it happened again for another 21 days.
Okay. Now, this is just me picking your brain. I'm trying to understand your thought process on this. So would you say that eating meat is sin?
It's a really good question. So when Jesus is asked about divorce, he's pressed on divorce in the New Testament. And he says, look, from the beginning, it was not so. But because of your hardness of heart, it was allowed through Moses. It was permitted, right? But permission doesn't always mean celebration. It's kind of a concession, if you will. It's like, imagine I'll just give an analogy to help understand what the word concession means. Imagine you're living as a roommate with a smoker, right? The smoker is going to keep smoking. You can't get him to stop, but you say, hey, look, if you're going to do that, can you at least do it outside? It's kind of a concessionary agreement. I know you're not going to stop right now. I think it's bad. I think it's horrible, but at least do it outside, right? So in the same sense, it's like, look, these people are divorcing each other. They're doing whatever. Here's the context in which I'll permit you to do it, right? So Jesus is pointing back to the beginning. And so in the same way, pointing back to the beginning, I think that whether you want to call it a sin or not, because sin it's an interesting word. It literally just means to miss the mark. Well, what's the mark? Eden. Eden's the ideal. God laid out the default settings for humanity, literally, plain as day. So if we're not on that, are we missing the mark? Are we missing the mark in some way? And I think as well, if it's producing a hardness of heart, that's interesting. And we have a Syriac version of the Gospel of Luke, which Syriac is the sister language to Aramaic, Jesus's actual tongue. And this text is from the 2nd century. So in the same time period as the oldest Greek scriptures that we have for the New Testament. And it literally says, Luke 21, 34, I believe it is. Jesus says, do not be aware, do not let your heart become hardened by the consumption of flesh and the drunkenness from wine and anxieties of the world. And so he lays it out right there that it's the hardness of heart. So there's a whole deeper rabbit hole that we could go into from the fact that the Greek text of the New Testament, what Jesus said, were written, as far as we know, and what scriptures we have, at least 100 years, 60 to 100 years after Jesus. And we have earlier Hebrew texts that are referred to, in which the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, as in the disciple Matthew, it's attested to by the earliest church fathers that there was this gospel that the earliest Christians used, the Nazarenes, the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. And in that, he specifically rejects the Passover lamb. He says, I have no desire to eat the flesh of this lamb with you. So I think what we're dealing with God never explicitly says it, is human hands maybe learning through the process of what God really wants when the ideal is laid out in the very beginning, right? Because of humans' folly.
So you would say it's sin? Would that be the short answer to that question?
Well, I would ask you if
To define sin, missing the, you would say this is missing the mark. Eating meat is missing the mark.
if Genesis 1:29 is the mark, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you agree that the Garden of Eden is the mark? Should we be aiming and striving for the Garden of Eden? To live like that?
That's a great question. Yeah, I do.
Well, I'll put it this way. And I know the listeners watching this right now are going to who are Christian are going to have, well, what about this verse? What about this verse? And as we know from our last conversation, we couldn't cover it all in one session, but I'm just going to speak the things that come up to mind. One objection people will say, well, what about when the Israelites are in the desert and they're eating manna and then the quail come? Well, what's interesting about that story and why it's pertinent to the is it sin question is if you read the Numbers 11 account of that text, the Israelites, the Hebrews, have just been freed from Egypt and they're out in the desert. And the story says that they're provided this manna of the earth, as far as we know, a plant-based food, the way it's described, as their provision. But they get tired of it and they say, man, I would even go back to my slavery just to go eat some of that fish again. I'm paraphrasing, but I'm saying it in our language. Right. And so Moses is like, oh my gosh, these people they just want to go back to their meat. And, he talks to God about it. And God says, well, if meat is what they want, they're not just going to get it 1 day, 2 days. They're going to have so much meat, it comes out of their noses, is the way out of their nostrils. Mm-hmm. And they wake up the next day and instead of manna, there's dead quail everywhere. And they all get a bunch of disease. I think 2/3 of the population dies. And they're weeping and wailing about the fact of what's happened. And they end up, it says in the text that they named that place where this happened, the Hebrew word for those who lusted after other food. Well, we know lust is a sin. So
do you think that was more so about them desiring meat or just their heart posture?
Well, that's what I said. It's a hardness of heart. I think there's a lust of the flesh. We often think of it in terms of sexual deviation, but I think there's actual literally lust of flesh that's connected to a gluttonous, needing to and desiring to eat one of God's creatures when you don't have to or don't need to, based on the default settings of Genesis 1:29.
I would view it differently. I wouldn't say that the meat in itself is the bad in that story. When I think of it, I go, okay, here's God providing for his people. And they're saying, hey, this isn't good enough. Give me something else.
Well, I'm not saying that the meat's bad. I'm saying killing, murder.
They didn't. It was provided for them. I'm just saying that particular story. I know your emphasis on it. Like, hey, God was giving them bread, manna, whatever, plant-based food, and then they wanted meat, and then they suffered from that. I don't think it's so much that, hey, because they desired meat, they're going to be punished.
Well, yeah, I don't think that either. I don't think God's punishing them. I think it's, again, it's a natural law. I mean, we see, and this, I don't want to get into like a nutrition debate. That's another conversation, but meat comes with all kinds of parasites and all of the illnesses that we have, zoonotic diseases and everything that, swine flu, this, and you name it, whatever, it all comes from domesticated animals being confined together. So it's not the way. And I think when you break what the way was laid out in Genesis 1:29, there are natural consequences like the story describes. They got plagues and got sick and died. I don't think that's God's wrath. I think that God's like, hey, I respect free will. Here are the consequences if you want to follow that way.
Okay. So it's not even.
But I want to be clear though too, because it's an ethical debate. I'm not so focused on how it affects me or even how it affects you.
Sure.
I really want to keep the focus on the victims,
okay.
the animals and killing and murder.
Yeah. I think you were cut off when you were explaining your answer about if we should be striving towards Eden. If you had anything else you want to say to that, feel free to go ahead, and then we'll move on to another question. If you had anything else.
Rephrase the question.
You were replying to if we should be striving towards the ideal, and is the Garden of Eden living like Eden? is the ideal. Yeah. If you had more to say on that.
And I did say yes, which
Yeah.
is in agreement with you. I think that is true, which in essence would make me a hypocrite.
Hey, we all are at times, you know.
Pretty good at it.
Well, but I really do want to utilize this conversation if we can, because like you said, before we started, you said, I really want to pick your brain. I want to understand because I don't understand. And so as I'm delivering any information that I can, you know, which again is only because I was in the exact same place you were. I was never a full carnivore, meaning eating only flesh.
Sure.
But I ate the standard way and hunted and did all of that. But it was really asking these deep questions scripturally, as we just were, but also just ethically, moral principles, logical consistency. And you conceding that you believe that that's the right way, I would ask, then what's stopping you? And, you know, I also, from knowing that we were going to have this conversation, looked around on your social media. I see that your catchphrase is "I don't give a rip," which in a lot of ways, I love the confidence of knowing that, like, hey, I'm going to do me, you're going to do you, sort of thing. But in your philosophy, I saw in a podcast that you said, "I don't give a rip unless it's causing harm to someone else." So my question would be, how, if you know this is the ideal in your own personal philosophy of I don't give a rip unless it's causing harm to someone else, if you just earlier conceded that murder is killing someone else, how do you justify your philosophy?
Murder's killing someone else without reason or something else, which animals, if I just go out and shoot an animal just cause, leave it there, murder. There's still purpose in killing animals, in my opinion.
Okay, but earlier you said you believe that we don't need to.
Yes, we could. Okay, I'll agree with you. We could sustain being vegan, but given the fact that we still have that choice, I'm going to make that choice. My thoughts haven't changed. That I still do believe humans are apex predators, and maybe we were vegan at one point, and maybe we'll return to being vegans at one point. Right now, my life here on this earth and many other humans, let's say it's 60 to 100 years. Same thing with divorce, right? That's not how it was supposed to be, but it still happens. Spouse cheats on you. They stop serving the Lord. They start beating you. It's permitted. I believe that we're in a period of time where, hey, meat consumption is permitted. Now, in the way that it's being done, I don't think it's great, but I don't see Jesus rushing back to cure it either.
Well, on the divorce piece, none of us, it's happening, but everyone hates it.
Right.
I mean, we just saw a CEO of some tech company go viral because he was having an affair with his wife at a Coldplay concert, and the internet's blown up over it and thrown a lot of stones, let's say that. But we don't have that same position when 90 billion animals are being killed around the world every single year for food, 99% of them in factory farms, in these horrendous conditions that you yourself indicated are horrible, that you do wish we could move away, but you grant that we can't because of the level of consumption. So something's got to change, right? Why don't we view that? What about that process allows you to say, hey, it is what it is?
With humans being apex predators, at the end of the day, considering the vast majority of the population are okay with meat consumption, there's not enough people that care. It's not a sight out of mind thing. People used to slaughter their own animals. Now they don't have to think about it. And whether that's right or wrong, let's agree that it's wrong. That, hey, if you're going to do this, you should at least have to face the brutality of this. People don't care about what's not in front of their face. And that's unfortunate, but that is a true fact of life.
Right. Since we're having a philosophical debate, I just have to point out that that's an appeal to populism fallacy. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't make it right. But you raise a good question about people not doing it themselves. So that is something I wanted to ask you. Have you ever killed someone yourself?
I've killed the animals, not people.
Well, animals are someone's. You said earlier that they're...
A lot of people would take someone as people.
Like if you say if you ever killed someone, most people don't think, have you ever killed an
understand.
animal?
Well, I think that's part of the problem. You mentioned that we're so disconnected from what we eat for large part in that it's hidden behind walls, and you're
Right.
oftentimes people trying to expose what's going on in factory farming are actually arrested and condemned as terrorists and face jail time, which is really interesting. But we also most people haven't killed animals themselves. And even in that phrasing, it's like, have you killed an animal? Well, most people, when they say that someone was a murderer and they wouldn't say, oh yeah, he killed a human. They would just say, oh, he killed someone. And why? Because humans are individuals and animals are also individuals. So just a blanket statement and call them animals, I think it actually paints the picture a little more clearly if we make them individuals. Like, do you have a pet?
I don't.
Okay.
I do love pets.
Yeah. And you would agree, I would assume, that pets are individuals. They have personalities that are unique. You connect with them and you're like, whoa, my dog is like this. Right. And he's just got that personality, right? So I think we disconnect the fact that they're individuals and disconnect the process that they have to go through. So that's why I asked. I'll rephrase it. I just was curious. Like, to me, it's a someone. To me, you're killing someone. But have you?
I have killed animals. Yes.
Okay. And
that was actually one of my questions: is if you hunt and kill animals regularly, and what do you feel when you kill an animal?
Yeah.
How is the process for you?
I don't hunt yet, and I don't kill animals regularly.
Well, yeah, it was worded kind of funny, but like, is hunting part of your lifestyle?
No, but I want it to be. I grew up around hunting. Was my first stepdad, big hunter. They owned lots of land and would hunt their own deer. We'd always have a freezer full of meat. And my mother and him separated. I was 5, 6 years old. Never got old enough to go out and partake. But at that time, would still hunt birds around the yard. And we'd actually, funny enough, we'd shoot and eat quail. So yes, I have taken the life of another, I've taken the life of someone, many someones, but you genuinely don't see any difference between humans and animals. There's no hierarchy between us. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say that. No, I definitely think humans are unique from a scientific level.
Is one above the other? Just in between a puppy and a baby, is one elevated?
Yeah, that's a common question. There's a puppy and a baby drowning. You're of course going to go save the baby.
Absolutely, I'm going to say if they're drowning, or the analogy that's usually used, if a baby or a dog is burning in a building, I'm going to save the baby first. Absolutely,
because it's unique.
Is it because it's unique?
Why would your reasoning be?
Right.
Or what's your reasoning?
Well, my reasoning would be because of so many factors. One, the potential of a human, and obviously we have connection with them as our same species and this and that. But I also think those distinctions aren't relevant for going out of our way to abuse them for no reason. So that brings me back to one of the previous points that we almost got to an answer, but I feel like we didn't fully get there. And it's a really good rhetorical question. And by the way, these questions I'm pressing, I don't want it to seem like I'm trying to be holier thou or anything, because these are the same.
I love this so much. You guys are both so respectful and kind. I'm so glad that you are here.
These are the same questions I asked myself, and I wrestled with them big time. So, now that we're on this, what trait? I feel like you agreed doesn't make right, and then the appeal to nature. We don't also sniff each other's butts, and sometimes lions eat their own children. So those traits aren't. What trait is it that distinguishes humans from animals such that it's justifiable to abuse animals or use them or kill them?
So my opinion on a hierarchy of humans versus any other species, whether insect or rodent, or I don't care, puppies, I think humans are above them. I would blatantly say that. I think God thinks that. Not that he doesn't care for them, but I think there's an emphasis on humans, whether you want to call it unique or chosen or in God's image. I think that alone makes that differential.
But just being above something doesn't really explain the trait. What trait makes us above them?
We're made in the image of God.
Okay, great. So what is the image of God?
Suppose you could... The simplest definition of God, I would say, is holy. But how would you define the image of God?
I think the image of God is really well defined through Jesus, obviously, embodying it to the fullest extent. But he pointed to the Father, to Abba, and the way that's discussed in Scripture, I think, is omnibenevolence, compassion, all powerful, all knowing, all those things. And I think us as image bearers, to embody that, the compassionate way to interact with a being lower than us would be to care and serve them, because I feel like that's what God does. That's what Jesus said. He said the good shepherd in John 10:11, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. It's a reversal of the hierarchy. And he says, I am that good shepherd. And then interestingly, fun little linguistic here, in John 10:10, one of my favorite verses in all of the New Testament canon, Jesus lays out the two ways. There's two paths in life, the way of life and the way of death. And he says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come to bring life abundantly. And that word kill, in the Greek that's underneath, it's thyse or thuo. And that Greek word literally means ritual animal slaughter. It means to slit an animal's throat, to kill an animal. So Jesus says the thief, the enemy, the adversary, Satan, the devil, whatever word, comes to steal, slaughter, and destroy. But I have come to bring life abundantly. The good shepherd lays his life down for the sheep. I am that good shepherd. So I feel with that model, this hierarchy thing, I don't understand how it works if it's because we have the image of God. I feel like the image of God is best exemplified through ultimate compassion for all.
I think love and compassion is a part of God's nature and image. I think oftentimes that's solely what people think God is, which is why I would use the word holy to describe God. I think that's the greatest word that one could use. Yes, God is love. God is compassionate. He cares deeply. He's kind. He has the heart of a servant. I agree with all of that. That is God's character and nature. He also has vengeance and has used nations to wipe out other nations and slaughter their animals, and has called people to do this. We read in the Bible. People forget about that side of God, that it's either all love or all bad, and it's typically people's view, and it's not just one or the other. Like, we forget these other characteristics of God. He's a just God. And in this fallen world, eating animals, Kim, you really do pose a good question, and you have made me really think that, okay, probably we're vegans, or let's say we were vegans, and probably will return to that when all is made right and new. But in the interim, if this isn't a conviction that God's given me, if he hasn't placed it on my heart, like marijuana, what are your thoughts on marijuana?
I don't smoke it.
I don't either, but are you pro, against, are you indifferent, or?
I'm ultimately people have free will. They're going to do what they're going to do. I think that.
You think it's right or wrong, or do you not care?
I don't care. It's a plant.
Sure.
I think you can abuse things like.
Sure. I'm not, this isn't a gotcha. It's just marijuana. I'm not for marijuana. I've smoked it like twice in my life, and I feel extremely convicted every time. That being said, I don't push that onto other people. Like, hey, you need to not smoke pot unless you want to go to hell, or it's just a really bad thing. If that's a conviction that God's placed in my heart, I think that that's something that I should adhere to. I really do. Other than the things that are what I would say blatantly obvious. And I know you believe that eating meat in this current world is blatantly obvious in the Bible. I'm still not convinced that, hey, this is wrong right here for the world that we're in.
I have a question. Yeah. Do you want to reply to that, or can I ask my question to him?
Well, maybe you can help frame your question. I was just going to say, we can stay on the Bible topic and cover some of what you said, and we can also just talk biology and, philosophy still, because that was one question I had for you, being Carnivore Ray, is that I think you admit earlier, you said this diet sounds crazy when you first heard it from Jordan Peterson, because it's already a stretch in many ways to justify humans are omnivores, because everything about our physiology is frugivore. But to say we're carnivores is a whole level of logical leap from the way that we're designed, that we have no similar trait, biologically speaking, to any carnivore on the planet. But
I want to hear more about your omnivore piece, but for the record, I don't think humans are carnivores. I don't believe that.
Well, then my question would be and when I say this, I totally understand. Well, I don't want to say I understand because I kind of don't, but I can see the experience of trying something that you heard someone say, like Jordan Peterson, having the results. We can talk about the reasons why some of that can happen, I feel. But then it's like, okay, well, I want to share this with the world. But now you're in a position where you've got millions of people following what you're doing. And though you may take the position of like, hey, look, I don't give a rip, I'm not telling anybody what to do, people are being influenced by it. You're an influencer. And if you're saying we're not carnivores, but you're influencing people all around the world to become carnivores, which has consequences not only for literally rejecting, because it's an abject lie about our human physiology, but you're also causing, like, imagine one human who was eating just a standard American diet. It's still a significant amount of animals, but if they replace all those calories with animals, that is a lot of carnage. That's a lot of death. And if you are someone who, I feel in this conversation, I believe there's a heart inside of you that does actually love animals enough to not want to cause additional suffering or additional death if you could help it. But my question is, what if you are, by promoting this lifestyle on the internet?
I could swallow that pill. I'd be okay with that.
Because I think you're not convinced that they should have enough moral consideration.
Yes.
To think differently.
Yes.
If you felt just as healthy as you feel now eating plant-based, would you do that?
If I had the same exact, that's a really good question. If I felt the mental benefits, the joint pain going away, being able to keep off weight as somebody who's always been a fat kid, if I felt like a superhuman on a vegan diet, probably, just because, not even for the ethical standpoint, carnivore's super boring.
Yeah.
And I want to get into why I even talk about carnivore, because it sounds crazy for me to acknowledge, yeah, humans aren't carnivores. I don't believe we're carnivores. I've never heard somebody take such a strong stance that we're frutivores and not omnivores. And I haven't done enough research to rebuttal anything that you said, but I want to learn more why you believe that, because I don't think that's a popular opinion. I think most folks would say we're omnivores. But the reason I talk about the carnivore diet is one from my experience too, but I've encountered just thousands and thousands of individuals with truly horrendous health conditions, autoimmune issues, and their quality of life has tanked so much. And I can get into reasons why that might be, but their quality of life is not good. They're suffering. Some rather would be dead. This isn't worth living. And they try a carnivore diet. And after a matter of some days, some weeks, some months, they find themselves being able to function how I believe God created us to function. And that's why I talk about it. If human beings can have better qualities of life at the sacrifice of animals, I'll swallow 10 of those pills.
Cam, I have a question for you. Would you consider the life of a bug to be at the same value as the life of a cow? And if not, is that not a moral hypocrisy a little bit?
Great question, and a very fair question. So what I would say to that is, obviously, I'm not going to be someone out here who's going to be advocating to kill bugs. If I have a bug, in my house, like a fly or a spider or whatever, I do my best to like grab it in a cup or whatever and release it outside.
All the ethical vegans I've had at my house do that. Like, if there's bugs on the ceiling, and I'm like, I don't think I would take the time to do that. I don't do that. But I've had friends who are ethical vegans at our house and see them. If you want to take the time to take those little baby cockroaches outside, go for it.
I do that because I can. It's just as easy to put in a cup and take it out. But at the same time, I'll straight up tell you, if a mosquito's biting me, I'm smacking it. That's self-defense. It's taking my blood. I don't feel it has the right to. So, so that happens. Now, I'm not out protesting bug zappers though. And I don't think you'd ever find a bug zapper activist. And there's a reason why. I think it's because bugs, the father of sociobiology is the term. E.O. Wilson. He's like one of the greatest biologists of our modern era. He concluded by studying the consciousness of all living beings that bugs are unique and that they have kind of a hive mind. I mean, you've heard this before with like bees, but they're an organism that operates as like a superorganism. So their consciousness isn't local to the individual. It's the entire species of, say, like an anthill. So if one of those ants dies, it's like more akin to a lizard losing its leg and then the leg grows back. There's going to be more ants produced, whatever. And that individual ant doesn't have a neofrontal cortex. It doesn't have the same capacities to suffer. It doesn't have all these things. Does that mean that you should go out killing bugs? No, I don't think you should. But I'm saying if you really want to nail down some kind of gradient or scale of value, I think the bigger question is value to whom? Because bugs and their relationship to a queen is one thing. I mean, queen bees kill other bees a lot of times, but a baby cow to her mother, that's a really high value relationship. And we break that bond all the time in the dairy industry, where we impregnate and artificially inseminate a female cow unnaturally. The calf is born and it's ripped away from the mother to take the milk, and they bellow and they scream for their child. And if it's a male calf, it's sent to the meat industry right away. If it's a female calf, she's raised to grow to start the same cycle. It's really, really horrendous. And so in that way, I think that value relationship is a really important distinction to draw. And it's something that directly affects us every day because of the amount of dairy we consume. Most people aren't eating bugs. I don't have an intention
to consume dairy.
No, okay. Not at all.
I don't know. That's you mentioned self-defense. Let's say an animal was trying to kill me and I killed it so that I could simply live. Mm-hmm. Could I eat that?
I wouldn't, but I think from a moral, ethical perspective, there's an argument that it's more justifiable than just killing an animal for food, and we don't need to. But I feel like if you really understand your own human biology, or if you understand scripture, or whatever your core philosophical underpinning is, you wouldn't want to eat an animal that's killed you. And you'd probably be really sad. And I know if a bear was attacking me and I had to kill it to survive, I would, and I would mourn. I would be really, really sad that happened.
I think I'd just be glad I was alive.
I'd be glad I was alive, but I would be glad that that's what had to happen.
I think morally, like roadkill, people ask, could I eat roadkill? I mean, I can't imagine there being a moral consideration there.
No, there's no moral
consideration. You might want to argue like a health stance there.
Yeah. I had a friend who ate a lot of roadkill. He's actually in our film Christspiracy, which, by the way, I didn't even say that in the beginning. My journey led me eventually to make the film Christspiracy, which is really honing in on the scriptural side and Jesus, but also all faiths and the way that different faiths and their morality is framed around this ethical question of killing animals and using animals. But yeah, I have a friend who we highlight in the film who had a lot of these questions, and he started eating roadkill actually. That's wild. It's really wild. But hey, you said carnivore was wild, so.
I do, yeah.
I'd love to give you more of a platform to be able to reply to a lot of what he said or share whatever's on your mind.
Oh gosh, I feel like I need to be taking notes. I know I've said this. I want to reiterate. I'm still not convinced that humans, Christians, either side, you could be atheist. I'm not convinced that there's enough evidence here to say, hey, everybody should stop doing it. I will say it's sad. I agree with that full-heartedly. But again, being on this hill of, we are the apex. We are above them on that hierarchy. I think as long as my opinion's there, my stance is there, I don't know that it ever would change.
But
I have a question for you. Would you what are your thoughts on the first time that you killed an animal? Because I know a really common thing that people who grew up hunting, and even my husband who grew up, he's plant-based now, but when he grew up hunting a little bit, and he remembers the first time that he killed an animal and it being very sad and it being a moral conflict inside oneself. Yeah. And would you say that would that is common, would you say? And if so,
I do.
Is that arguing for maybe our conscience of how we naturally are as babies? You put the whole phrase of, if you put a rabbit in a crib or an apple in the crib, the baby's not going to eat the rabbit. The baby's going to play with the rabbit and eat the apple. That kind of situation. What are your thoughts?
Great question. I hope I remember all this, but first time I killed an animal, someone. I do think it is a natural response for a lot of kids. You'll oftentimes see, picture, video, little girl, little boy hunting with the father, and one of them's crying. I didn't have that experience. I have cried over animals. I remember, I was probably 8 years old, and I hear this screech, and then I hear that vroom again, screech, and then I hear this vehicle take off, and I'm like, what's going on? And I run outside and I see a squirrel just scattered all over the pavement. And I bawled my eyes out. And I remember thinking how sad that was. Like, it was a squirrel. It's a cute little squirrel. Murder, senseless murder. And that's how I internalized that. Now, first time I killed a quail, I was freaking thrilled because we were going to go barbecue it. And even with babies, put a rabbit in there, put an apple in there. Of course, they're going to eat the apple. You could do the same with a grown adult. If you put mushed up spinach or you put bone marrow, I bet they'd eat the bone marrow. In my experience with babies, from what I've seen from personal, what a lot of people share with me, meats I assume that maybe now the thought of eating meat would make you gag, but before this lifestyle, I assume you enjoyed barbecue.
Oh, for sure.
Like, it was good.
Oh, for sure. But I will contest that what I've come to realize is most of the things that I think are good about meat are textures and flavors from plants that, raw meat, uncooked with blood all over it and everything, is a little bit repulsive. But yeah, when you're frying it up and you're taking the hair and the skin off and you're making it into a little round hamburger patty that's just shaped like an orange, which we're actually used to really wanting to eat, and you cover it all with a bunch of plants, then yeah, we're starting to hack our biology and who we really are, which is people who eat plants and then tricking ourselves into eating that. But I think to the point of eating the bone marrow, well, yeah, because the animal's already dead and you've taken it out. So I think her question is more around, we aren't killers. We're human beings. And that root is humane beings. And I don't know about you, maybe you can answer this question, but is there a humane way to kill an animal?
I would say yes.
And what is it?
I think I know we have differing views on this, but the way that the farm kills their animals that I get my meat from, they use that drill. It's not a drill bit. It's a bolt gun. That's what it's called. It knocks them out. They feel nothing. And then I would love to die that way. You tell me, Ray, you go to sleep and you don't feel pain. You don't. That'd be the best way to die.
Speaking hypothetically,
yeah.
If we had a bolt gun behind the couch right now,
yeah,
and I pulled it up and put it to your head, you wouldn't flinch and you wouldn't try to get away and preserve your life.
Of course I would.
Okay, well, animals do too. And
right.
so you made a point earlier about, cows go in chutes and they're used to it.
Yeah.
I've got footage in my film, which I highly suggest you watch, Christspiracy, where a cow's in a chute and it's fighting for dear life, turning around, almost breaking its neck, trying to get out of the chute. Why? Because it hears and sees its friend before it getting bolted and then getting slaughtered. And there's tons of proof that bolt guns don't always stun and make it so that they can't feel anything. That's just a myth. I mean, they have to sometimes bolt them multiple times. And
there's error.
Yeah.
For instance, the farm that I go to directly, when they send it off to the processor, because they raise it, they do all that, they send it to the processor. There's a USDA representative right there. If they're even rough with getting the cow into the chute, you get fined drastically. Yeah. Which I'm not saying it never happens. Of course it happens. There's error for everything.
It happens all the time. Yeah. I mean, there's tons of investigations that these facilities just do the most horrendous things to animals. There's no regulation. If you speak out against it, there's now, with ag-gag laws, you can tell the truth about something that's happening in the animal food industry and actually get imprisoned for telling the truth.
I believe it.
If it affects their bottom line.
We live in a crazy country.
Yeah,
I'm talking me specifically.
Yeah. Well,
I know the husband and wife that they're the farmers.
Can I say, because I don't feel, you said I didn't convince you about the hierarchy piece, but I don't feel that's a convincing argument for some trait, that's some abstraction, but like it's not an actual trait that we have that animals don't have that justifies us abusing them. It sounds like it's going to be a challenge to get you to justify that in any way. So I'd like to move on and actually talk about the humans involved for a second, because you clearly do care about humans. And something that was shocking to me in my investigations is that less than 1% of humanity kills their own animals. We offload that task by paying for someone else to do it, essentially a hitman to kill on our behalf. Then you have a whole philosophical argument of, are you actually killing it by doing it vicariously? But the slaughterhouse workers that are paid to do this for us are under horrific conditions, so bad that normal people won't do it. They won't do the job. So what we have to do is we use prisoners and immigrants in slaughterhouses, because they're the only ones that'll do it, because they're kind of forced to under blackmail. Because prisoners, a lot of times, I have one in my film, they're in a halfway house, they need a job to go back into society, and the slaughterhouse comes and says, well, hey, here's your job. If you don't do this, back to prison for you. They threaten them. And not only that, they pay them as low as 97 cents a day. Same thing, the blackmail with the immigrants. Do this or we're going to send you back, right? So it's a job that no normal human wants to do. Why? Because there's been studies done, like the study The Jungle is one of them. And slaughterhouse workers have the highest rates of depression, alcohol abuse, suicide, domestic abuse, through the roof at exponential numbers compared to most industries. We're inflicting that on these people by causing them to kill our own animals for us. And I've seen I hear you that you maybe want to get into hunting or whatever again, but from what I see, you eat at McDonald's.
Oh yeah, if I'm on the road, absolutely, yeah.
So I know that you're a person that cares about humans. And again, I'm not trying to dig up dirt or anything. I want to tell you right now, just to be vulnerable, part of the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because of part of the human connection, because my own brother was murdered at gunpoint. And after that happened, I've watched not only the process I've gone through, but then seeing and understanding and being in front of animals being murdered and not really being able to see the difference, especially when I see the way that mother cows bellow for their children. And that's what my mom's been doing for my brother. And it's never going to go away. It's always going to be there. And I think sometimes we hear these facts, like I just shared earlier about the dairy industry and the mom being pulled from the calf. And most humans are going to be hearing that and saying, oh, wow, that's horrible. That's awful. But then they're going to turn the podcast off. And a few hours are going to go by, or a few days are going to go by, and it's not affecting their household, but it's affected mine. And I can tell you, my mom's never going to get over that. That cow's never going to get over it, because cows hold baby calves in their belly for 9 months, just like a mother does, a human mother. So in the same way, I've been able to relate this to animals a little bit more. Since you're not quite there yet, if I don't mind, now that I've shared something vulnerable, I saw recently on a podcast that you shared publicly that you had an experience when you were young where your mom was being abused, right? And you wish that you could do something about it. And brother, let me tell you, that's awful. Like, I'm so sorry that you went through that. I'm so sorry that you went through that. But you wish that there was something that you could do. Now, everything in me wants to compare that situation of your mother with an animal that's being abused. It's going to be hard right now, but let's at least compare it to the slaughterhouse worker, right? This altercation between your stepdad and your mom, that's amplified tenfold in the households of slaughterhouse workers. And so if we're eating carnivore, if we're eating animals at all, using animals at all, we're in some way contributing to that. But eating carnivore, an exponentially exaggerated version, does that draw any connection for you in terms of moral consistency, you mentioned you wanted to see if you just don't have the conviction. God hasn't placed that on your heart. Does that at all feel like it has any convicting weight of the choices that are being made?
Still no. First of all, I'm sorry about your brother. That's
Thank you.
horrible.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst parts about life. And that's awful.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry.
Thank you.
And yeah, I had a rocky upbringing. In fact, speaking of prisoners' halfway houses, my dad's in prison serving a 25 to life sentence. And he's supposed to get out this year. Exciting. He'll go into a halfway house, but even prisoner conditions. So just talking about the it's easy for humans to have that out of sight, out of mind. I said that earlier. You kind of, tied it in right there. My father was in this prison. It's a medium security prison, which much better than the maximum security prison that he was in before. But there was a time during COVID where they were not let outside of their cells, sometimes for a couple weeks. A good day, 30 minutes outside. Water goes down. They'll get 12.9 fluid or 16.9 fluid ounces of water, and that's your water to drink and wash your hands and do whatever. I think most would agree that's not humane. That kind of thing does happen, and it's horrendous. Shoot, I'm impacted by that. My own father experiences that. I'm still not in the streets raising hell about how we need to have prison reform, when in fact we do, considering the U.S. has one of the worst prison systems in all over the world. Not to get too far off topic, but I think you're having a hard time reconciling that there's no way Ray understands the brutality of this and is still okay with it. I am. I acknowledge it's wrong. And the halfway workers or the immigrants, the illegal immigrants getting paid 97 cents, that's horrendous. I also understand that we live in this fallen, broken world. Even if I changed my mind today and said, Cam, I agree with you. In fact, I'm gonna use my platform to push the same message because I agree. Let's change the world. We wouldn't. You likely have different hopes that you will. I don't think the world will change. And so it's a lost cause. And if I'm permitted to eat meat, why not? And that's kind of where my mind goes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What is the purpose of life in your mind? I'll let you go first.
That's a tough.
It's a big question.
That's a hard question.
I asked that in another debate recently as well. And I know it's such a heavy question, but I do think it is an important question that ties into this conversation. Yeah. And I'm really curious what your thoughts are.
I think being a Christian, I think God made us for his pleasure, to be close with us. He was lonely and he made humans and animals and he made life. And so the purpose behind it, I think you could answer that a lot of different ways. I would answer that differently for humans. I would say humans' purpose is to love God and love people, specifically people. You could make the argument that 21st century living in the United States of America, dogs' purpose are for humans' pleasure. Cows are for our benefit. And yeah, I would answer that a lot of different ways. But life in general, I would say.
Yeah, my question was, what is the purpose of human life?
Human life. Okay.
That would be my question, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're called to love God and love people.
Okay, what about you?
It's a really deep question.
I really like that question.
It's tough.
I would say the purpose of life would probably best hold not through my words, but through my actions, in that I really hold dear my Christian upbringing as well, and Jesus calling everyone towards the kingdom of heaven, that it's here, it's at hand, it's within you. And like you said, to love God and love your neighbor as yourself. In other scriptures, he says, do unto others as you would have done unto you. I totally, as I mentioned before, see animals as others. But even if we can't agree on that, you mentioned very specifically, he said to love God and love people. I don't think you have to love animals to not abuse them. I think you can look even at the scripture and you can see, which we show in our film Christspiracy, that there was this horrific animal sacrificial system that was going on in Second Temple Judaism, which Jesus was brought up in. And there was these whispers of this kingdom to come in Isaiah 11, where there won't be slaughter. No longer will this happen. And I see Jesus as someone fully embodying God and saying, hey, from the beginning, it was not so, and it's about to be so now. And I don't care if it's going to change right now in this moment. I don't care but it's at hand. It's a mustard seed. And if we water it, it will grow in some way, shape, or form. And I see him as the only spiritual leader I've ever seen from any text I've looked at that actually went into the Death Star, literally, like Luke Skywalker, by taking he and the Nazarenes and ransacking the temple, which at the time was the slaughterhouse. That's where the model for our slaughterhouses come from. Before temples, people ate animals rarely or occasionally by either hunting, scavenging, mostly scavenging, to be honest, because hunting was really calorie intensive. It took a lot of work and everything. So it was mostly foraging and scavenging. But once we start building cities, they start building temples, and those become the slaughterhouses in a way to produce meat for the city. And that's what the temple had become. And Jesus was enraged about it. He said, this is meant to be a house of prayer. If there's a temple, it's a house of prayer for all nations. And really that word, ethnos, also means animals, herds and flocks of animals. But he says, but you've made it a den of murderers. That's something that we reveal in our film, as the Hebrew that Jesus is quoting in the temple isn't den of thieves. It's not just about the money that they're exchanging, but that's a problem too. And we can get into the animal industry and all the taxes. If you're I take it you're someone with like some slightly conservative or fully conservative values in a sense. Like, yeah, similar, same. And the amount of taxes and the money and the corruption and big pharma collusion and everything with the animal agriculture industry is awful. So it's a problem. But Jesus directs his anger at the cattle dealers, and he frees the animals, it says in John. He sends the cattle and the sheep out and breaks the cages for the doves. He's enacting the kingdom of heaven in the temple of God now. And so I know you say, well, I could change right now and I could do this, but it's not going to change anything. I don't believe that. I don't believe that that's what Jesus taught. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is a mustard seed, and it's something that you should be actively, if you can, to the best of your ability, be watering here and now. And yet, not everyone can do everything. We all can't individually change the world, but everybody can do something. And we've got an opportunity, speaking of ritual sacrifice and all, it's like, oh, that's an old time, but we're still, what's more ritualistic than 3 times a day, a meal? I know some of us eat 2 or maybe even 1 if we're on the warrior diet or whatever, but we've got a ritual where we're eating every single day, and we have a choice of how that impacts the revelation of that heavenly kingdom. If you're a person who's Christian, if you're not, and you just believe that the world should lean in the direction of more good done to others, that's an easy choice right in front of us every single day. And you literally said earlier that you don't think it's necessary. And then she asked if you could have the same effect by being someone who eats only plants, would you do it? And you said, yeah. So what's stopping you from trying it? Have you ever tried it before?
I have never tried it, but before there's a couple things that I want to address. So I've heard your argument on Jesus flipping over the tables, and it's interesting because I think you would agree with this. Most folks would focus on the money exchange aspect of that entire event.
Yeah, but again, it's an appeal to populism. I think it's
Sure.
I think it's a misunderstanding. When you talk to critical biblical scholars who understand the text, it's animal sacrifice is a major, at least equal factor, if not the sole factor of the anger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Most would focus on that. Sure.
Yeah.
You're making it more popular, focusing on the animals. Do you believe that humans were never supposed to sacrifice animals?
Well, Jeremiah.
Just strictly yes or no. Do you believe that they were never supposed to and they had that wrong?
Yeah, let's give a short answer so you can continue your thought.
Yeah, I believe it's an abomination to God, and I think God says that through the prophets pretty clearly in the Bible.
Interesting. And so to cover our sins, if that wasn't such a ritual and routine already, why would God send Jesus to be slaughtered and replace that with that doesn't make sense to me.
Because as Jeremiah 7:22, one of my favorite prophets, and clearly one of the favorite prophets of Jesus, because he quotes him all the time. Jeremiah 7:22, which is right after Jeremiah 7:11, when Jeremiah says, "Den of thieves, den of murderers," to the temple. He's the one that made that declaration, and Jesus just quoted him. A few verses later in 7:22, Jeremiah says, "God never commanded sacrifices." That's literally in our text.
Never desired it.
No, never commanded.
Which
Literally.
scripture is this?
Yep.
Which scripture?
Jeremiah 7:22.
Jeremiah 7:22.
God never commanded. Well, he says, when I spoke, because he's speaking on God's behalf. He says, when I spoke to your forefathers, your ancestors, I never commanded them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices when I brought them out of Egypt. So you see that throughout the prophets. Isaiah declares it. He says, what are these multitude of sacrifices? You have blood on your hands. Wash yourselves clean. Hosea 6:6, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And Jesus quotes that one too, twice actually. He says, and not only does he quote it, but when he's talking to the Pharisees, he says, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Encouraging them, go back to your Hebrew Bible and really learn. This is completely contradictory to the nature of God. So sacrifice and blood occult ritual is, again, like I talked about earlier with the story of Noah and Enoch, in the tradition of the Nazarenes that Jesus was a part of, most likely they saw it as not only not something of God, but something demonic, because it was associated with the fallen angels, that the fallen angels had taught this kind of practice, and you were actually sacrificing to them. You weren't sacrificing to God. And in terms of Jesus, because I don't want to skirt around that, I think that Jesus' primary focus was to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. And I think the temple and slaughter is an obstruction to that. And he says, okay, we got to get rid of that. But he also had to get rid of other things. He talked, like we said, he talked about divorce. He talked about doing unto others. He talked about sowing and reaping and all the different concepts. But I think, as we all know, speaking and preaching that level of the kingdom of heaven underneath the kingdom of Rome gets you killed.
Interesting. Yeah. I know I've asked this. I know a lot of other people have asked this to you, and I've seen the responses that you give, but if it was so direct, I know it's obvious to you, hey, we're not supposed to eat meat. There's a lot of people that would argue, even after hearing some of the responses that you've given, that it's not obvious humans aren't supposed to eat meat.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get in your brain. I want to truly understand why it's so clear. Because,
well, it seems
as a
like
Christian, just let me finish.
Okay.
Real quick. As a Christian, a lot of the things that I hear you pull from scriptures, and you know far more about the Bible than I do. I'm not a scholar.
I love the Bible. Yeah.
You're good at it. A lot of the scriptures that I grew up reading and still read today, not once have I ever picked up that, Ray, you shouldn't eat meat. And that's not even coming from just how I was taught or raised, because I'd like to think of myself as an objective thinker. I really do. I'm very intentional with that.
Definitely feel that from you, for sure. Just
in my own study time and time with the Lord, never have I even had just the slightest bit of guilt or, hey, Ray, you're not supposed, this isn't the way. I've never read that in the text, and I've never felt that with my quiet time with the Lord. And I think a lot of people are in that same shoes, where I understand it's evident and clear as day to you, humans aren't supposed to eat meat. Help me reconcile that. Help me understand that point that I'll die on this hill, that so much that we're not even biologically designed to have meat.
Well, I will say that I feel like I've laid it pretty clearly with the full context of the scripture that God's ideal is no slaughter. So it feels to me more like we have to understand how you could justify killing animals as something God wants. But what I'll say is, I struggle with the same thing for a long time. I totally understand. I don't think it's your fault. I don't think it was my fault. For a long time I did.
When you say struggle, you're talking about eating meat?
struggle with the idea of like, hey, this is what we've always done. And when I look at the scripture, it seems like, and from the way I was raised with church barbecues and going to Chick-fil-A after band practice with my gospel band and all of that, it all seemed like really contradictory. However, I think that's human folly in us making God in our image and us seeing what we want to see. And the way that I know it is, I'll give you an example. You mentioned at the beginning that you got into carnivore because you heard Jordan Peterson speaking on Joe Rogan and your appreciation for him. And I actually have an appreciation for quite a bit of what Jordan says, not all of it. In fact, we almost put it in our film Christspiracy. Jordan had a really big flub one time on national Canadian TV where he was asked about animal rights. And his answer was, animals don't deserve the same rights as humans because they can't reciprocate rights. But that's a faulty argument because babies and disabled people can't reciprocate either. So it falls flat. And he actually took that video scrubbed from the internet now. I actually have a copy of it though. But but to the point, like I have respect for Jordan in the sense of the truth and the way that he really wants to dissect scripture and help people understand the many layers of what the Bible means. But check this out. He wrote a book recently called We Who Wrestle with God. I'm sure you saw him advertising it everywhere. In the first chapter of that book, he breaks down the meaning of the creation account in Genesis and goes verse by verse explaining the archetypical, beautiful tapestry of interwoven mystery that's there in the way that he does. And he gets all the way up to verse 128, like I said, through dominion. And then in the following verse, we're prescribed a plant-based diet. And he skips that verse. And he jumps to verse 31 and says, oh, and it was good.
That's tough.
So this is something that's been perpetuated. It's people don't want to look at what it literally says in the beginning of the book. It's right there. Everyone skips to chapter 3 and starts in the fallen state and everything. But how do you feel when you show up to a movie and you miss the beginning? You're like, oh, dang, what's going on? Like, blah, 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 I'm lost. That's why we get lost and get confused. We got to look at in context. And I know everyone listening who has the feelings that you have where you're like, make it make sense. It still doesn't make sense. Part of that is they're probably thinking, oh, he's justifying and pulling and cherry picking scriptures. But my answer to that always is, no, it's literally the reverse. You have to cherry pick scriptures to justify abusing animals in the scripture when the literal, because cherry picking implies taking something out of context. The greatest context of the scripture is in the beginning in God's ideal, no slaughter, no harm, stewardship through service, and flourishing of humans and animals. And in the end, in the prophetic kingdom, what we're all striving towards, same thing. So you're picking something out of the middle to try to keep us right here, but why not do the heavenly kingdom of heaven thing now? You're able to, and you yourself said that you haven't even tried it. Now, I thought we were going to go into this, and you were going to say, "Oh man, I tried to be vegan for 3 months or whatever, and it failed."
No, I've never tried.
I totally thought that too. I just assumed.
Yeah,
no, I've heard. I mean, I've had countless people share that story of theirs with me. That I tried that. I know lots of people that did vegan for years. And I'm curious your take on that. Why is it that it seems to work for some, doesn't work for others?
Right. I always try to approach that without judging people too much because everybody's got their own personal experience. And I like to lead with asking questions. Usually if you ask questions, okay, well, what were you eating? And what was happening at that time? And you usually find that there's a number of factors. Now, just being honest, I've asked a lot of people that question and probed to find out that they were just lying. They weren't actually even vegan or vegetarian. In fact, are you familiar with Nina Teicholz? She wrote The Big Fat Surprise, which actually kickstarted a lot of the carnivore movement because she just raved about how animal fat is good for human health. And Joe Rogan talked about her work, had her on, and she was trying to debunk every vegan and vegetarian, et cetera. I asked her point blank in an interview about some questions, namely one of them being, if fat's so good for us, how much can we eat? And I asked her, could we just eat a whole tub of lard then? And she said, yeah, I don't see any evidence in the science to suggest that you couldn't eat a whole tub of lard and be fine. And then I would continue to say, okay, well, how did you get here? And she said, well, I was vegetarian and I was sick and blah, blah, blah. And then I went on to ask her, okay, well, what were you eating during that time? And she's like, well, I was eating this, this, and this. And then, sometimes some fish and some chicken and the this. And I was like, whoa, wait, what?
Normal diet.
But it's like the Genesis, like 129 thing. There's this weird cognitive thing that we have. It's a split consciousness. And I had it. I'm not pointing fingers. I'm saying I had it, but by the grace of God, through scripture, through the Daniel fast, and literally removing it out of force and taking a step back and saying, hey, let me really see this, it became clear. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I mean, it is all through the scripture. It's all through our biology. Anthropologically leans in the direction of, that humans' worst atrocities that we're facing all stem back to animal domestication. There's been full books written on this.
I have a question for you. Yeah. You said you've had pets before and you love them. Yeah. Do you feel there's a difference between the moral consideration of a pet versus an animal that you eat?
Maybe. I mean, oftentimes what people are asking is like, would you kill and eat your dog, but you'd kill and eat a cow? No, I'm not going to go out of my way to kill and eat my pet dog. If there was nothing else to eat, I would. Starving situation. I'm talking about, just go
survival.
To the grocery store. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moral difference. I think it's just your heart becomes softer when you're living with said animal. Right. And why people can turn such a blind eye is because it really is out of sight, out of mind. You had a wild connection of a steak in the shape of an orange. I don't agree with that. I think that's
a hamburger.
Or a hamburger.
A patty.
You compared it to an orange or something like that.
I compared it to an orange because it's all slick and removed and smooth and packaged up like an orange. Like
I don't think most people are thinking orange like, okay.
Well, they're not, but I'm saying texturally, shapes, these kind of things signal to us like, oh, safe to eat. Whereas if we saw a rotting piece of flesh with hair all over it and blood coming out of it, we wouldn't think the same thing.
Sure. Well, I run in a weird crowd. There are some folks that do love some raw meat.
I won't disagree. I won't disagree with the weirdness. Yeah, but hey, can I ask one thing on that? Because you did a really good. You actually asked something that I really wanted to ask. You teed it up. You said most people are disconnected from living with the animal. And earlier I asked you if you've ever killed someone or an animal yourself, and you said you had quail. But even that, when you're shooting a quail, and I know this because I went dove hunting when I was a kid. You're really removed from the animal in that moment. There's no connection. It's a wild animal. We have this challenge that we've put out, myself and my co-director, Kip, who made Christspiracy with me. We're calling it loosely the Christspiracy Challenge. And it is, and we've asked a lot of people this, and even on podcasts, and they've agreed to do it on podcasts, and then later on they don't follow up. So I'll preface with that.
I will answer truthfully.
Okay.
You ask me.
So what we want to show and eliminate that disconnection that we're talking about. And the challenge is this: would you, for the amount of time it takes to grow a typically farmed animal, say like a pig or a sheep, lamb, whatever, would you raise 2 of them from birth, interact with them multiple times, a month or a week until they get to maturation age where it's time to kill them? And then along the process you're filming, and then on the day of the kill, look them in the eyes and decide which one to kill to eat. Or ideally, mercy would be, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. But at least show yourself building that connection, to be honest with not only yourself, because you say there is that disconnection, but with others. And through that process, you name them both, build personalities, but choose which one to kill. And then if you do choose, unfortunately, to kill the animal, we want to film the process, and we want to know what about it's ethical, humane, anything that you're going to do to try to make it better. And there's some other rules on like, we want to just have a clear view and all of that, but really understand what's going on. Would you be willing to take that challenge? And ideally, again, I want to preface, ideally choose mercy. The point is, I think most people, if they actually live with animals and built connections with them, they couldn't do it, especially if they have to choose one. And the reason why I say choose one too, I just want to say really quick a little story. This is one of those moments where earlier I talked about dairy, and again I mentioned that it's really hard because it's out of sight and out of mind until it affects your household. But to make it that much more real too, there's a story that we filmed for Christspiracy that we actually cut from the film for time, but it stuck with me forever, and it's something that blew my mind. And that is that there was a farmer in New York who was noticing that their cow wasn't producing milk. It was a dairy cow. She was, and the farmer calls the vet. And so we interviewed this veterinarian who got this call, and she says, yeah, the farmer called me, said the cow wasn't producing milk. So I came out and I checked the cow. Everything was fine. It was super strange. Say, call me back if it keeps happening. So this happens multiple times. She keeps having to come out, and this cow isn't producing milk, and she can't figure it out, but it's a healthy cow. Finally, one day the farmer calls her and says, hey, I figured out what's going on. She had twins. And she actually, we let the cows out of the stable for a brief period each day. And she had been hiding her second twin baby cow in the cage where I couldn't see and didn't realize she had twins. She obfuscated the view of that baby calf to get it out into the pasture and took it into the woods. And she goes out there every night and she feeds it. Why did she do it? Because she knew from all those pregnancies before that they were going to take a cow. And she said, well, at least I can save this one.
Okay, I'd like to give you time to spend as much as you want, because I see your passion.
I want to answer his question.
No, I really want you to answer.
So my point, I just framed that with the whole idea of choosing one and knowing that they're individual. So would you be willing to take that challenge and let us or someone film you going through that process and documenting it?
So my ultimate dream in life, I live in an apartment right now, so this is, at least a few years away from this, but I want to have land and have a small homestead and raise all the animals that I eat and grow any crops like fruits or vegetables, because sometimes I will have fruits or vegetables. Like I'm not the person that says you can't have that, you shouldn't. I don't care. That's my goal, is to have that. And whether we film it or not, I'll probably be faced with that reality someday of being with and having kids too, and seeing them grow attached. And yeah, I still don't think it's as inhumane as you do. I think that's a fundamental disagreement that we'll have.
Fair enough. I get that you don't give a rip. I mean that jokingly. I'm being humorous, but the point is you may feel that way, but what about all the millions of followers and people that you're influencing who, if they were presented with the truth of what really happens in the farming industry and the way animals are killed, they might not follow the same path. So they're really disconnected. So there's that challenge. It sounds like maybe you're putting it off to someday when you have a homestead. But then I have another challenge. Given what you said earlier about factory farming and being against it, and not being willing to say, well, then 99% minimum of humanity should go vegan as soon as possible to eliminate that. Are you prepared to show and tell your fan base that all the animals, most of the animals you're consuming, everyone is consuming, come from this condition, and really show them, at least if you're not going to do it yourself, show them the slaughterhouse workers that are doing it and all the domestic abuse and everything? Or could I come on your channel and talk to them?
Like make content about that?
Yeah.
You won't enjoy it, but I would be thrilled to have content with you. I really would. I thoroughly enjoy talking to you.
Yeah. And I know that there's somewhat with conversations when people don't fully see eye to eye, there's going to be that tension.
It's crazy.
I saw before even you made a video about this where you were, or in your I don't give a rip philosophy, you said, like I said, that as long as it's not harming others. I still don't feel like we've really determined how it's not harming others to kill animals, but let's move on from that. You also said in that philosophy that you enjoy confronting conversations. and that you want to be wrestled with, and you want to wrestle with these things. I've done this, and I'm not normally the kind of person that wants to press people like this. I'm only doing it so much because I do feel carnivore is a whole nother level of just like, whoa, dude. Like, it's already enough that we have the standard American diet, but carnivore and asking or showing or promoting that is wild, especially with the fallout. Like Joe Rogan did carnivore. He's not carnivore anymore. He had problems. Same with Carnivore MD. He's incorporating all of this. Liver King just imploded the other day.
Please don't throw Liver King in there.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, man, like seriously, carnivore, come on. Like, are you going to, my challenge to you is, what is your legacy? What's your legacy going to be? I know that's something that matters to you, and it matters to me. It should matter to us all. What is your legacy? What if you, right now in this moment, don't think of me talking to you. Think of the moral philosophy, the scripture, the things that are coming through. It has nothing to do with me. What if you in this moment could feel that conviction? And even though you may not love animals enough to not kill them, you could see some of the injustices and the fact that people are so disconnected from this, and you could change the tune on your story, and in the process save not only billions of animals, but save households from all that domestic abuse, save the challenges that may come from people consuming a non-species specific diet.
What is your ask here?
Are you willing to change? Are you willing to move in the direction of dropping the exclusive consumption of animal flesh?
No. I to be fair, I don't just eat meat. I mean, sometimes I'll still have fruits and vegetables. I'm pretty open about this, but hell, sometimes I'll have pizza and ice cream and just live a little bit. But no, not at all. I truly, the backstory of my mental health, I mean, from the age of 11, 12 years old, 2-3 times a year, I seriously fantasize about just dying. Life's horrendous. Since discovering carnivore and being on this journey, it was the first entire year that I went without thinking life would be better if I was just dead. For me, that's enough. And you may disagree with me here. I think God looks at our heart. You might look at my heart and go,
I'm not judging you. I'm not judging you, brother. I'm judging carnivore ideology big time, but I'm not judging you.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be fair, I don't think everybody needs to be carnivore. I don't think anybody does. I think it's very therapeutic, and countless folks have found healing through that. And I think that should be celebrated. I know you would disagree, and that's okay. And you might even say that they can find that same healing through vegan. I've never tried it. I can't say one way or the other, but I've had countless people tell me that. You
got to try it for yourself, brother. And I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to help you. You've got the queen right here. I don't mean to point that out, but she's like, her channel, she makes the most yummy stuff. She's got thriving kids. But listen, on the depression piece and all that, my heart goes out to you. I get it. And in that state, we'll do anything to make it right? But there's so many examples of people shifting their depression through shifting towards a non-standard American diet, eliminating the processed foods and everything. A lot of the going to the meat is just you're eliminating all of that. And in fact, the sugar in fructose, is literally what our brain runs on, which is where the onset of depression really comes from. It's chemical imbalances in the brain. And it's shown that fructose in the brain and everything actually has a suppressive effect to like cortisol and these kinds of things. When I first went vegan, full vegan, it was a process for me too, from the Daniel fast. But when I really had that ethical principle and that alignment and was going full on with it, it wasn't long after that I really started incorporating a bunch of really natural foods, so to speak, with lots of fruit intake, whole foods, all those kinds of things. And all the blissful, whoa, I felt like a different person. I felt like I could juke Mike Tyson and all these things that you say. I felt that too. And there's countless people that have felt that as well. So I really think you should try it and see what happens. Now, one last thing I'll say is you could get down that road like many people, and you could come across some roadblocks because there's detox symptoms. There's these different things that can happen when you're literally eliminating parasites from your body.
There's also so many other factors to health.
Yeah,
like when someone says, oh, I tried a diet, didn't make me feel good. Like you mentioned, There's your mental health. What's happening in your life? Are you getting sunlight? How's your circadian rhythm? Are you sleeping well? There's so many factors. I think whole foods are very, very healthy for us. And I know that it can be easy to go to the diet portion. And I'm sure there will be plenty of people in the comments sharing their diet experiences in this conversation. But for the sake of the point of today's episode being the ethics of eating animals, we do need to close out soon. But I have 2 more questions. Hopefully we can do sort of quickly. But also another factor, I love your passion. I know you have so much to say, and I do love your posture of just wanting to be open to hear what he has to say. And as a result, you haven't gotten to speak as much. So if there's anything else you'd like to say towards the end of this to just give you the platform to share what you think, I want you to be able to do that. So I think I'll ask the last 2 questions and pose it to you first. What do you see as the core ethical question behind eating animals? Let's do a shorter answer because I only have a few minutes left.
The core ethical question behind eating animals?
For a question you would give him to consider that why it shouldn't be in consideration, if you would like to pose that, or
So in convincing you that, hey, it is ethical. Well, that's a lost cause. That's a great question. I don't even know that I have one for you, to be honest with you. I don't know that there is one that would even bear fruit.
Bear fruit. Notice what you said there.
Yeah.
Fruits, Garden of Eden.
Well, is there something else you'd like to say in response to all he's had to say before he gives his answer?
Just regarding the last part, I wasn't finished speaking, but I've eaten whole foods before. I was 315 pounds eating a standard American diet, lost over 100 pounds, got all the way down to 212 pounds eating a whole foods diet. I still had knee pain. I still had depression. I'm not the person that says, oh yeah, I tried. I'm like, I lived a whole foods diet. I even counted my macros. I ate a well-balanced diet. Micronutriently and macronutriently, it was a well-balanced diet from what everybody says this is what you should do. Felt great in comparison to being fat. Still had stabbing knee pain. Still struggled severely with mental health. Gained the weight back, and it wasn't even that far into carnivore. It didn't take months of detoxing. The 3rd day, I felt like life was possible, which is pretty impactful to me and pretty meaningful to me. And I'm not denying that there's folks that feel just as good and vegan. And I'm still curious more things about you saying that we're frutivores naturally. I've never heard anybody confidently say that. We're in different crowds though, so that's fair. But even before the carnivore days, I've never heard anybody say anything other than humans are omnivores. And so I'm going to do more research on that just to better understand your thought process there. I do think vegans are very compassionate. I know you say you don't have to be a super loving person to choose not to kill animals, but I do think for a lot of people that is where it stems from. It's usually one of 3 categories. It's for health, it's for moral or ethical reasons, and then third, people just feel good. And the camp that I'm in for carnivore, of course, I hear all the horror stories of vegan, and of course I'm going to hear that. I'm on a completely different opposite side. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, of course. Just like you, if you looked up carnivore stuff, you'd probably see how horrible it is and how I pooped myself in the airplane when I did carnivore. Like, don't do it. It's not good. You'd hear all the crazy, horrible stuff. I don't know that it's all that relevant. I don't think it matters as much as people make it out to be. I think that if somebody eats a certain way and they're not hurting humans in doing it, human beings, I'm okay with it. Yeah, I really am. And I can appreciate your heart for wanting to save animals, not just that are near and dear to you, but everybody. Because again, the world operates on out of sight, out of mind. Prisons, they're pretty darn unjust in this country. Nobody's rioting over my father being treated like a dog. Should they? Maybe. They don't care. It's tough, but that's true. And as god awful as factory farming is, and yes, I hope it does change someday. I'm not optimistic that it will. Yeah, I'm really not. And if everybody ate regenerative grass-fed and finished beef, great. Is that possible? No. Who knows? Even if it was, would it happen? Still no, because big corporations, big beef's not excluded. There's awful things that happen in this world, in this country. And as much as I can get behind somebody taking on an impossible task or a seemingly impossible task, I think it's incredible what you're doing, seeing how passionate you are about this, that you care enough that all animals should be, somewhat revered. I think that's amazing. I don't. And I think a lot of people are that way. And the unfortunate part is a lot of people are. It's the out of sight, out of mind that, hey, I'm sitting here telling you that I can reconcile that. I can reconcile killing an animal. In fact, to answer your question earlier, yes, I'll absolutely be a part of any film you want to do and be a part of that process. I'd like it to be my land. I don't want to travel to somebody else's land to raise an animal. But that's something that I could stomach. Could many others? Probably not. And so that the grotesque of killing an animal and harvesting it, that being removed and out of sight, out of mind. If everybody watched, I don't know, a factory farming documentary, would it make them stop eating meat? It probably would make a good amount of people stop eating meat for a period of time. Many of them would likely return. And so, all that said, I really respect your mind. You've dedicated a lot of your time to learning, not just biblically, but you're incredibly passionate about this. I think that deserves to be honored. I hope you're proud of yourself. I really do. It's something I struggle with, is pride for myself. I hope you're proud of yourself, because I think you are making a difference. I think asking challenging questions and getting people to really think. Nobody thinks. And whether somebody can reconcile killing an animal or not, I don't think that's your conviction to bear. But I think it's worth asking them that and getting them to think that through for themselves. Because not everybody's answers would be the same as mine. Some people couldn't stomach it. I'm telling you I can. I stomach much worse in life. Killing animals is not the end of the world to me. And so, said a whole lot of nothing there. But
No, you didn't.
I really do value you. Yeah. You as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're awesome, both of you guys. Okay, short answer for you. Short, please.
Yes.
Because I have one question at the end that I want to ask. What is the core ethical question in regards to eating animals?
Per this conversation and the viewers watching, I would say, am I morally consistent? I have beliefs, like in your case, I don't give a rip as long as you're not harming anybody else, which is literally, I think, the verbatim quote from one of your recent podcasts. Animals have bodies. So am I being morally consistent? If I believe that X, Y, Z is wrong, we talked about even just in the humans sense with the slaughterhouse workers. We're not even getting into all the chemicals that come out of slaughterhouses that are detrimental to my own hometown. There's a slaughterhouse that's just ruined our drinking water. But am I being morally consistent? And I guess just beneath that, and then I'll cut it, is to help that make more sense. If it's wrong to harm, use, abuse sentient beings, and if killing animals for food does that, but it's not necessary, then why do we do it? Why not just stop?
Yeah, I definitely have moral inconsistencies. Without a doubt. I'll own that all day long. Not just regarding diet, but everything. But especially what we're talking about here. Just by me saying I love animals and I care for them, and I'd rather them not die. just to take this so far, if only factory farming meat was available and I couldn't have the good meat that I currently eat, I would still eat meat, knowing how horrible and horrendous that is. Because again, there's that hierarchy that I have in my head.
What if it was factory farming, but you had a whole abundance? Because that was something that I don't think we really touched on, is that just the abundance of plant-based foods that we have and the ability to grow them and ship them around the world and all the things that we can do. What about if it's not pasture raised versus factory farming, but what if it's factory farming or whatever versus the abundance of all these other options that you could also thrive on and not face depression and recommend it to others and it heal them and have the same gratification and experience of changing people's lives?
Yeah. Potentially. I'm not sold that if I eat solely fruits and vegetables and grains, that I'll have the same experience, simply because I already ate whole foods before, a wide variety diet with the only meat that I was consuming was really like chicken, just lean meats. And so you're telling me that, Ray, what was causing your knee pain and depression was the chicken and ground turkey that you were eating?
Very possibly, because it's inflammation, right?
Potentially.
Yeah.
But
so
now that I eat a lot of both those things and not fruits and vegetables, that's not clicking in my head. Why does fruits and vegetables plus chicken make you have knee pain and depression? But if you remove the fruits and vegetables and just have a bunch of chicken and beef, that works. Oh, but also if you just do the fruit, for granted, I've never tried it, but that math isn't mathing in my head.
I actually think the mind is so much more powerful than we give credit for. That's one of the answers I would give to that one. I'm not sure what you will give, but I have one more little question. Are there any ethical areas? Are there any ethical gray areas that you personally struggle with on this topic?
For, like, personally? Yeah. I mean, yeah, the horrendous statement that I just made a little bit ago of even if factory farming was my only option, I'd probably still do it. It really is horrendous. Like I know I'm saying this and my words don't carry much weight considering I follow mostly a carnivore diet. It still breaks my heart. I can acknowledge that things are sad and still be like, you know what? It's unfortunate. It is what it is.
I'm struggling right now with how to understand this position with, like, even though all this and this, I am struggling a little bit with that. But other than that, in this moment, let's see what comes to mind. To be fair, I think the bug question was a good question. There's definitely some gray area with how you approach that. I think people approach those things differently. It's kind of similar to conversations around some people are what's it called? They eat shellfish like oysters and think that because they lack a certain level of sentience that's not. There's these kinds of gray areas.
I think a really popular question that carnivores or meat enthusiasts would pose to vegans are, what about the animal life that gets killed through crop harvesting in big agricultural systems? Aren't you actually killing more animals? That's a common one people ask vegans. Yeah.
And I think there's fair assessments in there to really consider. But before even getting into that, ultimately, like I said before, 77% of all cropland is fed to animals. So if crop deaths are an issue, the biggest issue of crop deaths is the animal farming industry, because we have to kill so many animals in crop deaths then to feed them. But I also know that a lot of those claims about crop deaths have been challenged and even some debunked, because combine harvesters rattle the ground and the rodents scatter and not nearly as many of them are killed. And there's an argument, it's out there as it sounds, it's still logically consistent, that there's no way to prove that, say, a crop, and I'm not advocating for monocropping, by the way. I think plant agriculture can be done much better. I think that we need to innovate there. We are withheld from being able to innovate because it gets less than 1/100th of the amount of funding from the government. The animal agriculture industry gets subsidized to the 300 billions per year. I'm paying, me as someone who doesn't support animal abuse, when I pay taxes, I pay for other people's hamburgers, because McDonald's, where you eat, they actually should be charging somewhere around $15 per burger, but it's what, $6-7? I don't know. But the reason that it's different is because they're subsidized by the government. So like, I'm paying for McDonald's. So anyways, bottom line, The crop deaths thing, it's been debunked, and there's nothing that suggests that on a plot of land where there's a crop that there's more net deaths than there would be if it was a wild piece of land with predator prey. I mean, there's so many ways. It's just a silly.
I do have one last question for you that I wish that we asked earlier in the conversation, but do you think there should be a legal difference between what you can do with a dog versus a pig, for example, because they have been shown to have similar cognitive ability for play and love and connection? So do you think it should be legally allowed to kill a dog for food? And if you don't think that should be allowed, why not?
Yeah, I would say here in the United States, no, I don't think it should be legal. And that's strictly just a culture thing.
So it's just for culture, yeah?
Yeah.
Instead of, but morally, is there a difference for you?
Morally, yeah, but that's because the culture's embedded in me. You know, I've grown up knowing that dogs aren't food. Not everybody in the world has that same understanding. Some people, that's their only source of food, or one of few sources of food. And so, yes, here in the United States, of course, I think that it should be illegal to kill and eat a dog. But that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, sorry.
No, that's strictly just because of the culture of this country.
Okay, you reply, and then we're going to be done.
Yeah, well, the cultural argument, I mean, you know, it was cultural to own slaves for a long time. And in some cultures, it's still cultural to have human slaves. I'm sure if you could do something about it, you'd end human slavery anywhere. So differentiating it because of culture, I don't think is it's just not, I mean, we've already just talked about the moral consistency, and the logical consistency isn't, I feel, really there with that. Pigs are smarter than dogs, actually. So intelligence wise, everything about them, if whatever rights or treatment that we give the dogs should inherently apply to pigs as well. But the fact that it doesn't shows how broken our mentality around this subject is, and how much we've been brainwashed by culture to think the way that we do. But I take you as someone, given that you're going against the grain of your own biology to eat carnivore, that you think differently to some extent. And so I think that you can break that cultural narrative. I think that you know better. You know what we're talking about. You know what we're saying here. And you admitted, like, hey, man, I'm not morally consistent. And I respect that. I actually respect that.
I respect
statement.
the honesty.
I respect the honesty around that. And by all means, have I been morally inconsistent in my life. But when I'm held accountable and I'm brought to the awareness of it, as a man, I try to correct that. And so my challenge to you is, are you really going to walk away with this conviction steep in it and see if that mustard seed of conviction can grow a little bit?
There's no conviction for me. There really isn't.
I think it's because you're not spending all day killing animals, like the animals or
likely.
The people that are killing the animals that you're eating. Well, but you're eating. What did you eat? What did you eat this morning?
I had eggs.
How many?
Sausage.
How many eggs?
Let's say 5 eggs.
Okay.
It was a hotel breakfast.
Okay. And a sausage, or multiple sausages?
2 sausage links.
So for those eggs, I don't know if you know this, but in the egg industry, billions of baby chicks, baby male chicks, are ground up in macerators alive because they're useless. So for every one of those eggs, not only is that chicken not going to get her young that she's trying to birth, but behind that are all these other deaths. For the sausages, there's countless pigs in that sausage. I mean, you know, sausages are a conglomeration of all these different parts of animals.
Same thing with
so just from that,
patties.
yeah. So just from that one meal right there, if you shifted that, you have the opportunity. Like I hear you say you're not convicted, but you yourself aren't killing those animals. You aren't macerating the chicks in the chick thing. You aren't going out and killing 5 pigs for breakfast. And if you had to every day, I think you would probably kill some animals. I can tell, but I don't think
pushback is, I guess maybe there is slight conviction on, hey, maybe it's not worth eating at some franchise where there's 500 cows in one patty. Maybe that's not worth it. Because even before this conversation, it's still, it's just not right. I have no qualms with raising a cow a year and butchering a cow. But yeah, and you're right. Hotel breakfast, that one sausage link, let's say there's 50 pigs in there, not just 5. Yeah, probably not right. I mean, are there any areas that you sacrifice where had some avocado, it was flown from however? There's no death. There's no true death-free meal. Things die. That is a fact. It's a brutal fact, but it's a fact of life. And it doesn't matter if it's just plants. Things die from getting it from point A to point B. Unless you're telling me that the only things that you eat and drink are from your specifically grown garden, I don't want to hear nothing about death-free meals. Because we're all guilty to some extent. Now, I would say, hey, I'm guilty of much more death than you are. Admit that. I'm not saying that, I would say, sure, you're better than me, but does that really matter? If you're, I kill this much more than you, we're guilty to some extent. Now, maybe I'm more intentional with my killings and you're less intentional, but there's still deaths. There's no death-free meal.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there's no question that in the process of transporting and growing some food, there's going to be unintentional deaths. I think it's overblown how much there is. And I wish we had time to pull up data on that.
Does it matter?
Yeah, I think it matters.
So
I think there's 90 billion animals being killed every single year intentionally. There's no way to eat an animal without killing it. There's a way to eat an avocado without something dying. You can grow a tree in a front yard and you can monitor and make sure that you're not killing other sentient living beings.
You don't even have to monitor that. The avocado in my tree is just there and it grows avocados.
What I'm getting at is unless somebody is intentionally growing their food like that.
And I really do try to do as much.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do it for all of your food, not just when you travel. Make sure you pack it with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real unless you're. I think there's a little bit of a moral superiority.
Absolutely not. I have zero moral superiority. I think that there's nothing actually moral superior about not harming and abusing and killing animals. I think it's just baseline humanity. I don't think I'm better because I do that at all.
So you think I'm worse because I do?
I think that you're deceived.
So your baseline. You're not saying that we're here and you're doing this. You're saying I'm here and I'm doing
that.
This.
Almost sounds worse than what he said. You're saying the baseline of being a human is
I think our
so you're saying that he's less than that? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying he's
My
just
actions are.
No, it's not
what you're saying.
It's not a less or a greater. I'm saying you're just not being who you really are. I believe in who you really are. I think there's a child of God inside of you that would play with the bunny rabbit and eat the apple, but you're conditioned by culture, as you admitted, and you're deceived by the fact that you're not seeing 5 pigs killed for your sausage this morning every single day. And so you're able to cognitively disconnect yourself from truth, from reality. You're in the matrix. And I've been there. I've been there myself. And I don't think that I'm righteous because I'm not there anymore. I just think that I've taken the time to see, and I know that I don't want to participate in it. And it's just a baseline being a humane being and following my own biology and everything. So I think the moral superiority straw man is a way to hand wave and take off the little bit. You had a seed of conviction there. And now I feel like you're tossing it off at me by saying you're morally.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you at all see where he's coming from a little bit, just about how majority of people listening eat animals, feel that it's natural, and clearly we know there is there are going to be some people who say there's no difference between animals. I mean, that we are different, but no moral difference between animals and humans. But I think most people, even vegans, would say, and it sounds like even you say, that are different. But for instance, we have a much easier time connecting to a baby cow than we do a fish. And we have an easier time connecting to a fish than a bug. And so, he's just, I think from what I'm hearing, sounds just like this, you just don't feel convicted by the animals. And
I really don't.
Do you understand? Do you
I
understand,
but I think there are vegans that out there that will say, yeah, I'm morally superior, but just by definition, logically speaking, because I'm doing X, Y, Z. I struggle with saying that because I think I'm just morally consistent. I don't think I'm superior. I don't like this whole superiority thing because I do unto others as I would like them to do unto me. And I wouldn't want someone to be talking to me from up here.
Or maybe could you say logically consistent?
Logically consistent.
Instead of morally consistent? Because that word morally has a very heavy word.
Logically consistent, morally consistent, however you want to put it. There was something else that you said in there that I wanted to reply to.
We do actually have to
How are you not better if you're the baseline, but everybody else is not at the baseline? It's clear as day. Better.
because
it's not a straw man. I feel like I've been pretty reasonable in saying, hey, I get where you're coming from. I disagree, but I get it. I'm not sitting here trying to put you in a gotcha moment, but I think it's being a little disingenuous.
No, for a lack of being able to fully describe it, the best I could do is like similarly when it comes to the Christian concept, how, again, like I said, most people skip the first few chapters and jump to chapter 3 when we're all sinners. And there's a concept in a more dispensationalist Christianity where it's like, we're all sinners. We're all just sinners and cursed from birth. That's not really actually scripturally accurate. We're actually all children of God, and we have a predisposition to sin if we don't hold accountability to ourselves or have others hold us accountable. But I think fundamentally, you have an inherent value that can never be taken away as a human being, just the same way we've been talking about with animals. I just think it's just more, I'm morally or logically consistent in what I'm saying, but I will never sit here. It would be going against my belief as like a Christian or my belief in Jesus to judge someone else or to say, that have some higher place over you. That's not where I'm coming at from this. I'm actually trying my best right now to just be a mirror and ask you the same questions I asked myself when I was in the exact same position, because I believe in you. I believe that you are the kind of person that you could pull yourself out of this deception, that you could pull yourself out of this kind of funk. And I know to a lot of people listening, it's going to sound like, man, if they're not on my side or whatever of this, they're going to think, man, he's just like proselytizing, really trying to convert this guy. That's not what's happening, though.
That's what they'll think.
No, it's different when there's a victim involved. So I'm not going to try to proselytize and change everybody's actions when it's not harming someone else. So like you said, I don't give a rip unless it's harming. If it's not harming someone else, I don't give a rip. I'm very similar for the most part with a lot of things. You asked me about weed. Cool. If someone wants to smoke weed, whatever. I have my thoughts about it, but I'm not going to try to convert them out of smoking weed. But when there's a victim involved, and remember, the word victim is the Latin victima, which comes from animal slaughter. It's the sacrificial animal on the altar whose throat is slit. There are victims involved in these choices. So it's not my opinion. It's not your opinion. That's why I said at the beginning, I'm trying to get to a capital T truth about objective reality and logical consistency. And when there's a victim involved, I feel the moral obligation for myself to do my best. And I also feel the moral obligation to share with others around me what that capital T truth is, in the hopes that they'll consider that victim as well and look at it from their perspective. Put yourself in the perspective of the animal. What if you were the one on the chopping block?
The apex predator got me.
But
all right, you go ahead and make your final closing statements, and we're going to end here.
I don't just think there's a hierarchy between humans and animals. I think God thinks that too. I genuinely do. I'm not saying he doesn't care for animals, but there is a hierarchy. In fact, he tells us that, hey, don't worry about what you're going to eat or wear or drink. Not even the birds worry about that. There's no sense in telling us something like that, hey, not even the birds. Like, God takes care of the birds. Of course he's going to take care of you.
Mm-hmm. With our species-specific diet, yeah.
Carnivore,
well, that's what I'm saying. He laid it out. He says, don't worry about going. I see it as, don't worry about like the birds. Don't go out trying to.
No. He's saying.
He compares us to
If
birds.
I take
Yeah,
care
hey,
of birds, No.
Well, wait a second. He compares us to birds. Remember that, because you said we're different with the image of God.
He
Guess
doesn't
who else
compare
does it?
us to birds. He says, if I take care of the birds, how much more will I take care of you?
Right. And the wisest man, according to the scripture, Solomon, who's the wisest man who ever lived, right? King Solomon. You agreed? That's the way.
Yeah.
Really quick.
Let's close this out.
Ecclesiastes, and this is perfect when we talk about the hierarchy, and I'll end here. I'll be fine ending here. Ecclesiastes 3:18 and 19, written by the wisest man who ever lived according to the scripture. In that text, Solomon says, man has no advantage over animals. Both are the same. Both have the same breath, ruach, spirit, the breath breathed in the Garden of Eden when they came and animated into life. As one dies, so dies the other. Meaning, do unto others. How we treat animals has the same meaning and the same impact as how we treat other human beings. From the wisest man, according to scripture.
Okay. Do you have any 2-sentence final words before I close out?
There is a hierarchy.
Okay. I think.
Well, I agree. Kings.
Yes.
cool, let's have a king, let's have a president, but the president doesn't then get to slaughter and eat us. The hierarchy doesn't imply, anyways.
Okay. Well, thank you guys both so much for being here. I'm sure you guys can continue the conversation. I'll really get FOMO for not hearing out more on it if you guys continue as you leave. But I really appreciate you coming on to my podcast, that you knowing that I'm, plant-based and vegan, and hearing him out, and with such a posture of listening and wanting to understand him. And I appreciate you with your kindness, and you're clearly passionate and have so much on your heart about this. I just appreciate you both. I think you're both kind, wonderful humans. And thank you so much for being here. We're going to end it here.
You.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen.
Bye. If you're enjoying these thought-provoking conversations that challenge what you think you know, please do me a huge favor right now and hit the subscribe button. The more subscribers we have, the more amazing guests we can bring on to help reignite your curiosity, expand your perspective, and upgrade your life. Thanks so much.